All right, let's begin the meeting, and my apologies to those who are attending via Zoom. We had some technical challenges to overcome, but I want to open the Hamilton Planning Board Tuesday, August 3rd, 2021 meeting. On the agenda tonight is the Senior Housing Special Permit Public Hearing application of Chabaco Capital Partners, LLC, regarding application for a special permit at 133 Essex Street, and then a conceptual review and discussion of a 40B proposal from Harbor Lights Community Partner at 421 Asbury Street, and then board business following. So before we begin, I have to read two public hearing meeting notices, so please pardon this. This will go on for probably a couple of minutes, but it is a formality that's required by law. Notice is hereby given that the Planning Board will hold a public hearing Tuesday, August 3rd, 2021 at the Hamilton Town Hall located at 577 Bay Road, Hamilton, Mass, on the application of Chabaco Capital Partners, LLC, in accordance with the following described applications for the development of property located at 133 Essex Street, Hamilton, Mass, and shown on the assessor's map as parcel ID number 65-000-0001. Senior Housing Special Permit pursuant to 8.2 of the Hamilton zoning bylaw to develop the property as a 50-unit age-restricted condominium development, and 2, stormwater management pursuant to Chapter 29 of the Town of Hamilton bylaws dated April 2nd, 2016. Full and complete electronic copies of the above cited housing special permit and stormwater management permit applications, together with the associated plans and other information and reports, are available upon request by emailing the town planner at preffett@hamiltonmass.gov, or by calling the planning office board, calling the board office at 978-626-5248. Plans are on file at the office of the town clerk and at the office of the Director of Planning and Inspections Board office located at Town Hall, 577 Bay Road, Hamilton, Mass. 01936. Any person interested or wishing to be heard on the application should appear at the time and place designated herein. Options for online participation via Zoom with phone-in options will be posted on the town's websites. Persons needing special accommodation should contact the Hamilton Planning Board at 978-626-5248. That's for the hearing, and then for a second hearing on scenic public roads hearing. In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 15C, the Hamilton Planning Board will hold a public hearing August 3rd, 2017 at 7 p.m. in the Memorial Room of Hamilton Town Hall and via Zoom electronic and call-in options as shown in the August 3rd Planning Board agenda posted with the town clerk and on the town website, to consider an application by Rebecca Campbell, representative of the estate of John L. Gardner at 375 Bridge Street. The request is to allow removal or alterations to 20-foot section of a stone wall at this property. All wishing to be heard regarding the matter should attend the hearing. Okay, so we will begin the Senior Housing Special Permit applications hearing. But before we do, I want to read a document that I prepared in really to help both the planning board members and the general public, who I'm assuming most of whom have never been to a planning board meeting, don't know exactly what the planning board does, its responsibilities, and how this process works. So in an effort to help the understanding of that process, I'd like to go through sort of the background and rules and how we will proceed with this hearing. So first of all, I want to thank everybody that's attending via Zoom. This is a hybrid option. We've spent the last week dancing on a head of a pin trying to figure out how to accommodate the public process and public health requirements. So, first of all, I want to start off with the background and role of the Planning Board. This board is a 7-member elected board. Each of us serves for a 3-year term. We are charged with overseeing compliance with state statutes and local zoning bylaws. We also engage in land use planning by creating or amending new and existing local bylaws. So we're very much governed by statutes and by bylaws in what we do, and especially that will be true tonight. First of all, I'd like each member of the Planning Board to introduce themselves by name, just so that the people viewing the audience actually knows who we are. And if you'd like to remove your mask so they can see your face, that's fine, but please put it back on for the discussion. So we'll start moving from my right. And please speak into the microphone directly, as the masks do impede comprehension.
Jonathan Poor. I run a architectural site and landscape design business in Gloucester for over 35 years. I've served on a number of boards and assisted a number of boards in Gloucester over the years. This is my very first board position in Hamilton, and I'm honored to be here.
Thank you, Jonathan.
So I'm Corey Beaulieu. It's my first and only board I've served on, both in Hamilton and otherwise. I'm a director at a marketing company for architects and developers. Means I do 3D renderings of projects that are being proposed to town boards and town governments all over the world. Yeah, I've been doing that for 10 years. Attended architecture school prior to that.
Thank you.
I'm Bill Wheaton. This is my second stint on the planning board, having been on the board in the 1990s. I'm an MIT professor in the Department of Economics. And one of my fields is real estate and land use regulation.
Thank you, Bill.
My name is Emil Dahlquist. I'm an architect. I've been an architect for 50 years. And previously in another town, I was chaired a design review board for 20 years, Building Code Board of Appeals for 20 years, and led several design-oriented boards. So I'm been a resident of Hamilton now for about 3 years, and glad to be on this committee.
Thank you. My name is Rick Mitchell. I'm chair of the planning board. I've been on the planning board for almost 20 years and have been participant in the development of many of the bylaws that we are going to be discussing tonight, including the senior housing bylaw. And that's my background. And Marnie?
My name is Marnie Crouch. I'm a retired bankruptcy attorney. I worked for the federal government for approximately 30 years. Prior to that time, I had a career in historic preservation. This is my first term on the planning board. I'm also chair of the Affordable Housing Trust here in Hamilton.
Richard Boroff. I have been was a professional photographer for about 20 years. Spent a few months, about a year and a half in the Army. Done some work in finance, working with mutual funds, and ran a user group with that. And I've lived in town for over 40 years now.
Thank you. Patrick?
I'm Patrick Reffitt, Director of Planning and Inspections for the town of Hamilton.
And Pat?
Yeah, I'm Pat Norton, backgrounds in engineering and facilities and process design for biopharmaceutical facilities. New to the town, new to the board, and I'll be helping Patrick to facilitate some of the questions and the presentations tonight, so bear with us.
Yes, thank you, Pat. Okay, so we now know a little bit about the board. My role as chair is really going to be to guide this entire process, and I'm going to be acting as a referee and an umpire and probably master of ceremonies all in one, just to try and keep the process moving forward and make sure that everybody gets a chance to be heard who may be in support or against this proposed or this application. So I'm going to read quickly. The role of the applicant is going to present the application and documentation for a special permit under our existing senior housing bylaw. They will thoroughly explain technical details of their application. They will answer questions from the Director of Planning, Planning Board members, and the public. They will respond to requests for information, modifications, or amendments to their application. And finally, they need to persuade the Planning Board that the application meets statutory and zoning requirements as specified in the Senior Housing Bylaw. Role of the Planning Board members is to review the applicant's documentation, raise questions, make observations and comments, request clarifications and additional information, and engage a third-party technical expert to review the applicant's documentation, and that is done at the applicant's expense. Suggest possible application plan modifications, and then vote on whether the applicant has met zoning and statutory bylaw requirements. Role of the audience. Role of the audience to observe and participate in the Planning Board public hearings. Present their observations, their opinions, and documentations to support their point of view. Present testimony of their technical experts, and request clarifications, suggest modifications, or changes to the application. The hearing process tonight. Hearings and all documentation are open to the public. Tonight is the first step in the applicant's presentation of general information supporting their application. Future meetings of the Planning Board, the Planning Board will drill down and focus on specific technical, environmental, public safety, and legal issues. That's not an exclusive list. We will be very diligent in going through this with a fine-tooth comb. No decision will be made without an in-depth Planning Board review and public input lasting many weeks and possibly many months. This is a large and complex application, and it's going to get a thorough hearing and review by the Planning Board and the public to ensure that it's been thoroughly vetted. After the applicant's presentation, and this is how this will work each and every night, Planning Board members will be the first to ask questions, make observations, seek clarifications, and ask for additional information as needed. During this period when the Planning Board is asking questions, Zoom participants will be muted, and just to make sure that we get our chance to ask detailed questions. The public's Zoom participants, once Planning Board members have finished with their questions, comments, etc., the public is invited to participate with questions, comments, testimony, etc. Now, this is where I want clarification from Pat to make sure that I'm accurately stating this so that everybody who's attending via Zoom knows how they can do that in terms of asking questions. Public can comment, submit documents, and ask questions via Zoom during the public comment period by using the raise the hand feature on Zoom. Am I correct on that?
Yep, that sounds right.
Okay, very good. So, then lastly, I want to sort of express some guiding principles to how this should operate. Respectful all participants, whether you agree or disagree with them, everybody has an equal say, equal standing before this Planning Board. No negative personal innuendos or attacks will be tolerated. Please keep your remarks focused on specific topics and issues being discussed. Please refrain from repetition of questions that have already been asked or comments made previously so that everyone has the opportunity to present different points of view or information. And finally, we ask for your patience as we navigate this hybrid process. We will strive to adjust and improve the hearing process as the public health advisories allow. So, thank you for your patience and all the introductory information that's been presented. So now we can get down to the meat of the matter. I think, Pat, if you can allow the applicant, I'm guessing it's Jill Mann, to enter and make a presentation.
You could ask that person to raise their hand who wants to speak.
Okay, Jill or whoever's representing the applicant, can you please raise your hand so you can be allowed to enter and present?
Looks like Jill Mann.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Good evening. I think that Larry Smith actually wanted to also make some introductory commentary. Would that be acceptable, Mr. Mitchell?
Yes, just let us go through the process of opening up that channel. Are we good?
Should be able to talk.
Could you hear me?
We
There you go,
can.
yes.
Yeah, I don't have a video. Let me see if I could do something about that. Jill, do you have a video? Could you be seen?
I do not. I can't get on a video recording right now. I don't know if that's possible, Mr. Norton, or not, but I'm not able to see anyone else.
And
Right.
same with me, Patrick.
Let me try this. I don't see an option to allow them to share their video.
I think you'll have to admit them and let them turn their video on, unless that's what you're doing.
Admit them?
Promote them to panelists.
Whatever you did to us, do it to them.
Yeah.
Promote to panelists, I guess, yeah. And then after I guess you can just take away their privileges.
Yes, there you go. I'm just, okay, here we go. There we go.
Yeah, I think we're there.
All
And,
right, we
Jill?
have a picture.
Great. And we also have Andy DeFore from Main Drilling and Blasting. And I believe if you want to ask questions of our site engineers, Brent Cole and Jeff Merritt.
Okay, we'll log them in, but would you like to?
Sure, I'm happy to start. Thank you. So thank you, planning board members, for donating your time and efforts to understand our application for the village at Shabako Hill. Our team also wants to thank the few of you who are on the board for the approval process of the village of Canterbrook Farm. I am hopeful that you take pride in your decision when you see this project nearing its completion. So since reviewing your feedback on our preliminary plan sent to this group back in April, for the village of Shabako Hill, we've been very busy working diligently to generate the application and its supporting documents for the special permit, which you have in front of you tonight. So I'd like to introduce our real estate team who assisted in the collaborative efforts to generate this plan. And by the way, board members, I think you hinted at this, Rick Mitchell, at any time in the future, if any of the disciplines that help put this together, if you'd like to hear them, we're happy to bring them to any of the meetings you suggest. So leading up the team is Jill Mann of Mann & Mann PC, and of course Jill's here tonight. Brent Cole and Jeff Merritt from Granite Engineering, and they're also with us tonight. Not with us, but part of the team is Don Preventure, our water line engineer from Preventure Engineering. Ken File, our architect from LaGrasse, Janowitz, and File. James Christensen and Lissa Robinson are hydrologists from the engineering firm GEI. Andy DeFore, which is with us tonight. Andy, you could raise your hand. Andy's our subcontractor from Main Drilling and Blasting. Our landscape architect, Bill Fleming from Fleming and Associates. And our lighting consultant, Carol Kochmar from Illuminate Lighting, who did the exterior lighting plan. And of course, our own team, Tom Schlosser and Julia Dickinson. So as the board members are aware, our company is not new to town. Our on-site team at Canterbrook has established, we believe, has established a good working relationship with this board. And I hope you could ask other agency heads in town to inquire about our integrity, our workmanship, our attention to detail. I believe we developed a very good relationship with the building department, DPW, the fire department, the Affordable Housing Trust, Concom, and of course the assessor's office. Jill is going to speak in much more detail about the financial benefits of the town of Hamilton with the approval of this special permit. Once built, the village at Shabako Hill will generate over $750,000 a year in real estate taxes, with no burden to the school system and no burden to any other agency in town, because we actually have a condo trust in place which plows the roadways and maintains the roads, and we pay for the trash pickup. There is a de minimis cost, though, for the fire department and police department for their services. So, by the way, we have a proven track record of the assisting town base. Canterbrook is currently, the village of Canterbrook Farms is currently trending towards generating a yearly tax rate of about $375,000 a year. The equestrian center before us generated only $27,000 a year. In this particular, going back to Shabako Hill, we'll be donating $1.4 million to the Affordable Housing Trust. And there's also one-time fees of about $350,000 for permits and other miscellaneous fees to the town. So there is a huge financial benefit to the town. And not that I would believe that I understand the town finances, but I can't imagine where that type of revenue could come from with no burden to the town resources. And before I turn the presentation over to Jill Mann, Plus 55 housing is pretty popular these days, but we have some features that we're adding to our Plus 55 condos, which we could talk about at a later date, because we believe, or I believe personally, and some of our investors believe, that aging in place longer could delay the costly end-of-life fees associated with assisted living and nursing homes. And again, we could go into that detail much more. But these particular homes we plan to build will be able to have the residents age in place much longer than typically in Plus 55 communities. So for now, those who don't know Jill, wave your hand. Jill Mann, and Jill's going to walk the board members and the public through the details of this plan. So thank you, everybody.
So, good evening. As Larry had introduced, Jill Mann from Mann & Mann PC, legal counsel for Shabako Hill Capital Partners. I just wanted to say good evening to the board, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you very much for coordinating this evening's meeting. I know how difficult it can be to manage not only a panelist, but hundreds of people in some form of participation. And thank you very much for those efforts. And Mr. Norton, you have challenges before you, I'm sure. What I would like to be able to do is to be able to share my screen so that I can kind of walk through some of the slides. I'm not going to give a full presentation of each of the individual plans, but rather an overview so that we can stimulate conversation, so that we can dispel some misinformation, and so that we can provide every board member, as well as the abutters, with a good base to be able to go forward and analyze the special permit request that we have before you. So, Mr. Norton, I don't know how you actually allow me to share my screen in this format. I can't really tell. Oh, I can say share screen. May I do that?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, here we go. So what, may I ask, do you see in front of you pictures of homes?
Yes.
Okay, I can see now. I know which screen is the one that's my share screen. The reason why I put this up is just to give you a general background while I kind of go through the project. These are examples of homes in architecture that have been developed previously by sister companies that Mr. Smith is principal of, and basically that are affiliated with Restoration Capital, which is the group that actually does these individual developments. They did Canterbrook. They've done the projects in Manchester, Gloucester, Amesbury, I believe, and now they have a project in Groton that just was approved, and now they have a project here in Hamilton, aside from Canterbrook. So this is just an example. I'm very excited to be here tonight because I think that it's a wonderful team to work with. I really enjoy working with this team. It's professional. We come to this board with a full complement of professionals. We have already provided all of the information in the application. We make sure that when we deliver information, it's complete, and we are basically ready and prepared to answer any questions and to bring additional people in to testify, because we have already hired those people as part of our due diligence in permitting the project. Because before Mr. Smith actually goes in and determines that he would like to develop a project, he conducts extensive due diligence to ensure that the property is well suited for the type of development he prefers to develop, which is something that is visually attractive, that is going to provide a benefit to the town. And I'm also happy to be able to bring this to Hamilton. I feel as though the project that was permitted with Canterbrook, of which I was a part, was a valuable asset. And I believe that this particular project, as we go through the process, people will become aware of how valuable the project in fact is. We support many of the town's purposes, and as Mr. Mitchell said, we honor a lot of the purposes, if not all of them, that are part of the senior housing bylaw and are part of the fabric of your master plan. We're going to create senior housing, which is something that's woefully inadequate in Hamilton. We are going to reduce urban sprawl. That's what the master plan wants. That's what senior housing wants. We condense development into one area. We take large development and we condense. And the other thing that's one of the purposes is to actually provide for alternative forms. So these are all condominiums. This means that the project will be privately maintained, the roadways will be privately maintained, and all of the infrastructure will be privately maintained, which Mr. Smith actually touched upon, that this particular development does not create a burden on the tax base. And the beauty of a senior development is that it does not burden your school system further than it already is. So what it in fact is a net gain on tax revenue the day people move in. It also is going to create a tremendous amount of open space, and it's going to create farmland. What I'm going to show you is a copy of our basic plan. I put up the open space plan because I think this plan is the one that's more readily recognizable. It's easy, it's all on one sheet. If you've looked at our submittal, there are 87 sheets. It's almost impossible to try and flip between everything. But this provides a comprehensive overview of the plan. As you can see, all of the green striped areas are the areas that are open space and will be preserved in perpetuity. And by that I mean forever, because we will enter into a conservation restriction that has to be approved by the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs. They sign this particular approval, or CR, and then from that time forward, it is land that is preserved for conservation purposes and cannot be undone. I mean, it can by legislative act, but it cannot be undone. It also will preserve farmland. So we actually recognize the fact that this community is a farm community. I mean, that's what it originally started out with. You have a lot of farmland and you have a right to farm bylaw. So when Mr. Smith met with Ms. Rich and her family about buying this particular land, it was very important to the Riches. And Mr. Smith is honoring that, and it has become very important to Mr. Smith to actually continue to farm approximately 9.4 acres of land. And I have a plan that I can show you, and I will, but that basically is this entire area. It will continue to be farmed. And I know that's important, again, to the community, and we're pretty excited about maintaining it as well. As you can see, I'm going to stop annotating. So as you can see, the entire exterior of the project is actually open space. We maintain 50 acres of open space. There's been, and this is one thing I really want to hit on now, is that there's been so much chatter online, so much misinformation, so much diversion. This particular project, I'm going to say it. Everybody's saying save Tobacco Woods. We're trying to. So what we're going to do is we're going to produce land that can actually be used by the public, because presently it cannot. It is private land. Historically, it had at times been open for public use, but due to abuse, neglect by people who are using it, people who are dumping on it, people who are pulling out stakes, the permissive use has ended. But it's our goal, Mr. Smith's goal, to actually preserve that and have it be a part of that CR that I had spoken about. So once we dedicate and we create an open space plan, that plan becomes perpetual as well. And those lines that you can see, I'm going to annotate one more time, you can see the trails. We are going to ensure that they're passable and you can see them and where they actually connect. So now the residents, the public is actually going to have the legal right, the benefit to utilize those trails freely, to park in an area here and to traverse through the woods permissively and to actually be able to walk from Chabaco Road to the woods, which really are at the bottom here. This is where the Chabaco Woods, in fact, are. So I share that because I think it's important to understand that we are dedicated to basically the same goals as much of our opposition. We want it to be open space. Essentially, as I had said, one of the things we are going to preserve is the bucolic view, right? That's a big deal in Hamilton, as it should be in many communities such as this. So we're preserving the entire area that will be located along Essex Street. And how we do that is because we're maintaining that farm space. We're not going to do anything along Chabaco Road in this entire area. So you can see where it's all open. And that is already vegetated. When you drive down Chabaco Road, it is vegetated, it is wooded, it is preserved, it is beautifully forested, and that will be maintained. The area that we are going to be able to, we're going to have to clear to be able to make the roadway and the entrance is very limited. We intentionally kept it so that we could have a narrow approach and then have the development be at the back of the property. Again, number one, to create buffers to existing residential homeowners that are across the street. And number two, to ensure that this meets the purposes of the senior bylaw, which is to maintain the integrity of the rural aspect, the farmland nature of the property. So that's how we have done it, by creating this type of development with substantially all of the development behind and not developing the farmland. Again, we're dedicating 50 acres, so we're going to preserve farmland, meadow, and wetland. And what that allows us to do is to support the wildlife on this area. So the connectivity between, between our open space and I'm going to just move this up and I can't do it until I stop that. So the connectivity between our property and Chabaco Woods is being maintained, and you can see the big open space below with the trails. And by the way, when I say trails, we're talking about natural trails. We're talking about if we have to go in and develop them, because there is an existing trail system now. What we'll go in and do is meander about trees. We're not cutting down trees to put in trails. What we're going to do is meander through and then process on-site wood chips to make it a very naturalized trail. So we will connect. We will provide the wildlife with a beautiful corridor because it can still access Chabaco, and we're maintaining all of that existing landscaping, all the natural existing landscaping. I do want to just go through a little bit about the Rich's plans to develop the property. So clearly, it's our intent to develop it in this format. We intend to develop it. Actually, before I show you I have an alternative plan that basically shows you the, one second, I have to actually go in here, that shows you the alternative development. If this property can't be developed as senior housing, it's going to be developed. But what would it be developed as? And we actually created a conventional subdivision plan. I'm going to show that to you. Here we go. Give it 1 second, it just has to populate. I apologize, it just takes time. Okay, so this particular plan, the engineers, Jeff Merritt and Brent Cole, actually developed it. This plan complies with zoning and with subdivision control. So what we did was we asked the engineers, look, develop a road that's a through road. Don't put any cul-de-sacs on that exceed the length of roadway that is permissible under subdivision control. make sure that we comply with the width requirements and radius requirements of the access points, and please make sure that we can put in some A&R lots, because whenever you do a subdivision, the best development option is to be able to develop A&R lots, sell them, and then put the roadway in to begin to develop. Because when you really do go forward with a subdivision, it is typically best to put in the whole roadway and just do things at once, because of the method for selling. Because typically in a conventional subdivision such as this, we would sell the lots, or the riches, whoever they would sell it to, would sell the lots, and those people or a group of developers would develop each of the homes. So as you can see, the alternative, which is a conventional development plan, is quite a sprawling plan. It doesn't support any of your master plan goals, and quite frankly, probably doesn't satisfy what the design is presently of open space for the town. So this is our alternative plan. And I do want to go through a comparison, but before I do that, what I would like to show you is our phasing plan. And then I'm going to ask Mr. Dufour to actually speak to you about one of the issues that everybody's raising, and that is, how do we develop this land, right? Okay, it's land, it can be developed. And while this is not part of the special permit process, because the development aspect and the manner in which properties are developed is not a subject of a special permit and is not a basis upon which to deny or approve, but rather is something that must be done in compliance with external regulations. For example, fire codes, building codes. You know, you have to meet all of the subdivision codes. And if that doesn't apply, you have to meet just traditional access development aspects. And Andy's going to go through some of those, but I just wanted to show you this one plan. So basically, Mr. Smith does not want to develop this in one big group. He doesn't want to do 50 homes at once. His preference is to go in and allow the community to absorb the development. So the plan is to actually do this in 2 stages. Now, what will end up happening is what you can see before you is what I call the phasing plan. I think it's even marked phasing plan, I'm hoping. And what it does is it divides the property in 2 pieces. So it's about, I'm going to say 1,300 linear feet from the roadway in. So we go to the very back of the cul-de-sac, back of the loop, and you can see where we have a proposed temporary cul-de-sac. So even though it's temporary, we're going to take out some of the pavement that would have made the rounding. We need to provide the fire department with the ability to come in, turn around, and go out. So that's why we put a temporary cul-de-sac in. But the purpose of only doing half of the road development is to allow there to be the creation of the roadway, taking out the trees that need to come down, allowing the earth to settle, allow some of the planting to happen, and again, just allow the community to catch up with the development and not to do it all at once. So we are proposing to create this portion of the development and to undertake certain ledge removal. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody who's been out there that there's ledge on the property. You can see the outcrops. Anybody who worked in Chabaco Road from the DPW knows this as well. And by the way, we did preview this plan with the planning board. We previewed it with the all of your department heads and have had great feedback, and we've responded to it all. And we've hired Andy Dufour from Maine Blast and Drilling, not only to be able to do the ledge removal, but we asked him to be our consultant during the permitting process so that we could explain to the board upfront, let's just talk about it now, because there's too much hypothesis about what's going to happen and how there's going to be so many burdens. And I want Mr. Dufour to dispel some of that, to just provide complete transparency, and to make sure that any questions you may have, we're going to answer tonight so that we can get into the meat of what really is the special permit is all about. Mr. Dufour, could you take over now and just kind of describe the ledge removal process, if you would?
Yeah, just to get the technical things out of the way. Can everybody see and hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. Like Jill said, my name is Andy Dufour. So I work with a company called Maine Drilling and Blasting. And everybody always questions the name Maine. It is Maine, like the state, but the only reason we are named that is because we were started in Gardner, Maine 55 years ago. So we've been in business 55 years. We do business all the way from northern Maine right down into Alabama. So we're the largest drilling and blasting company in the Northeast. My role in the company, I am the division manager for our Massachusetts territory. So this isn't what I do for a living. It's part of my job, but this isn't my role in the company. You know, if this job, when we were going to perform the operations on this project, I would be the one overseeing it. I do have that responsibility. But what we want to do, what we typically do, you know, I typically would go from a PowerPoint. We don't have that kind of time tonight. So I do have some notes in front of me. And I just want to touch on a high level, try to demystify some of the blasting process and the fears, you know, involved with it, and just let everybody know how we're regulated and what the process is. So we are heavily regulated. In the state of Massachusetts, we fall under the Department of Fire Services. More specifically, we're under 527 CMR1, the Massachusetts Comprehensive Fire Code. So we actually pull our permit from fire prevention in town. They would actually issue us our permit. In order to get a permit, there's certain conditions that we have to meet. So part of the pre-blast planning, we actually, per the code, and I won't read code all night, but I think this is very important because, you know, people are very concerned with their homes. But per the code, it states that anything within 250 feet of the blast zone requires a pre-blast survey. And it says the intent of a pre-blast survey is to provide documentation of the existing physical condition of buildings and structures within the blast area with the dimensions of each observed defect clearly noted. It says when blasting within 250 feet of a structure as measured from the closest borehole to the structure or structures not owned or controlled by the project, a pre-blast inspection survey shall be offered. It shall be the responsibility of the blaster to notify structure owners of the survey. So the first thing we do is we have to document existing conditions of the surrounding homes within 250 feet. And although it's not part of the code, Larry has also asked us to do the wells. So we'll also test the wells, even though it's not part of the code or a condition of the permit. While the pre-blast surveys are happening, we continue with the pre-blast planning. And at this stage, we don't just go out and wing it and close enough. We actually have mathematical blast designs that we come up with. We determine these by the blast location, the distance to structure, what type of geology we're blasting, and the vibration estimate calculations. We call this a pre-blast design analysis, and it basically is used to scale the blast geometry and charge based on proximity to structure and safe vibration limits. So what we're doing here is we're actually trying to predict, it's a predicted peak particle velocity, or what the vibration at the closest homes will feel. Per the code, we have to limit that to what's called a 2.0 inches per second. And where that comes from is that's where the U.S. Bureau of Mines, which has adopted, Massachusetts has adopted that code. That 2.0 inches per second is where they say cosmetic damage will occur to the weakest construction material, which is laid on plaster construction. So per the code, we're not allowed to cause damage to the weakest construction material. So we know concrete, things of that nature can withstand a lot higher vibration, but we are held to that 2.0 inches per second. All this information is compiled into a blast plan. It's a comprehensive document. It includes these pre-blast analysis and vibration calculations. And it also includes things such as our safety data sheets. So all the materials that we're going to be using, the blast material, the actual products that are going in the ground, all the product information will be in this blast plan. It'll have our sequencing and narrative of how we're going to do the work, where the seismographs will be placed. We'll get into that. All this information is compiled into a blast plan and is typically submitted to the owner's geotechnical engineer for review, so it gets a third-party review. Once all that is done and everything is approved and we get to work, the actual blasting on the site is achieved by basically drilling a series of drill holes in the ground. So it's a grid pattern. Typically here will be anywhere from 4x4 out by the road to, maybe 8x8 when we're 1,000 feet off the road. It all depends on how close that closest structure is to control that vibration to prevent any damage. So we drill the holes in the ground and then we load the explosives into them. The final step on that before the blast is detonated is we actually cover the blast zone with what are called blasting mats. These are 12 by 24. Some people call them blankets. They're actual recycled tires that are woven together with wire rope. Each one of them weighs 11,500 pounds. So in a blast like this, there would probably be 30 of those placed on top of the blast. And what that does is it prevents any debris, from leaving the blast zone. It keeps everything in the blast zone. Once that's done and the blast is ready to go, there's a series of warning signals, and this is also by code. They need to be audible within 250 feet. There's 3 audible signal pulses. That means it's 5 minutes to the blast. 2 audible pulses is 1 minute to the blast. Before the blast goes off, the blaster will yell fire in the hole, and the shot will be detonated. And then he'll make sure all the explosives were consumed in the blast. He'll say it's all clear, and he'll blow 1 whistle, which will signal that all is clear and everybody can get back to work. So safety is first and foremost. Before the blast is detonated, we have a formal written site security plan. What this ensures is that nobody's in the blast zone at shot time. We actually have on paper any of these trails we've been talking about that are out in the woods that people might use on a daily basis. We make sure we get sentries out there, make sure nobody's on these trails. If we're out near the road, we'll make sure traffic is stopped before we blast. So we have a formal site security document showing where these sentries will be placed and how the communication between them will be. If they don't have visibility between each other, we have radios we use, cell phones, how the communication will take place to deem that the blast zone is safe before blasting. And then after the blast is detonated, the vibration we've been talking about. So the state regulates us from two measurements. One is ground response, which is the vibration, and the other is air overpressure, which is actually the pulsing in the air. And we record both of these measurements with what's called a seismograph. So per code, the closest structure to the blast zone needs to have a seismograph placed within 10 feet of the foundation with the owner's permission. And we record what the actual vibration and air overpressure was. And that recording needs to go to the fire department. So every day we're out there blasting, there will be a fire detail from the fire department with us monitoring our operations for any time that there are explosives on the site. And then the explosives, sometimes we get questioned, those come into the site every day and leave the site every day, and nothing is left overnight. Whatever doesn't get used on a daily basis will go back to a secure magazine site, one of our magazine sites. And that's pretty much what typically leads up to the blasting and then what's in a typical day. It's a very high level, and I'm sure we'll get into some questions, but that's the overview.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate that. So I just want to, so I'm very much a layman when it comes to blasting and ledge removal. So I just had a couple of perspectives when we were discussing this with Andy that I'd like to share. So we are definitely going to be surveying people's homes that are 250 feet away. So you can pretty much see, we'll have to do a final blast survey of which Andy will be a part, and so will Jeff Merritt and Brent Cole. But suffice it to say that you can pretty much tell that it's going to be somewhere around here for the 250-foot blast zone. So that, I apologize, 250 feet, I guess, radius, right? So it's going to shoot out 250 feet, and that's what we need to measure. And as Mr. DeFore said, that's just because it's an abundance of caution, and we will include those seismographs. So it just measures, so if you feel the vibration, we want to know what that vibration is, because we don't want to have any harm. And you need to also understand that Mr. DeFore's company is licensed, it's insured, and we make sure that when we go out there, that if anything did happen, you actually have recourse to an insurance company. So all of that is procedural. It's by the statute. It has to happen, and there's always sufficient security. It's very infrequent that there ever is any kind of an impact because of the small procedures that are used that go up to the fact of when you start blasting, because they just don't walk in and do it. It takes a long time to get all of the procedures in place to allow that to happen. And I
Jill,
asked
there is a formal claims process with the fire department. If somebody feels they have damage to their home, it's called a regulatory review form. And you would go down to the fire department, you would fill that out. And the blaster actually, who is doing this, the blaster, it's his license, because it's through the state. He would have to go down and sign for that, and we would have to do a formal investigation. So there is a mechanism in place if people do feel that they have damage to their homes. So.
And there you go. And we may, and again, that's why we use a licensed insured company with the reputation that Maine Drilling and Blast has. I do want to just point out one thing. So as I had said before, we're going to do this in phases. So actually, Mr. Smith's going to be spending a lot of money in developing all these homes before he does phase one. So as you can see, we're going to have homes built in the rear part of the project. You can see them all here. And when those homes are built, we still need to have some ledge removal in this area. So we will be undertaking ledge removal while we have homes built. And I just wanted to let you know, it's not as if we think it's not us. It is. So we maintain those controls, and we believe that the blasting can be executed in a fashion that is safe for everyone. So that was the phasing plan. And you can see what the second phase is. We just intend to complete the project by extending it and completing the balance of the construction. And I will just note that there are 25 homes in the first and then 25 in the next. The project does include 12 single-family homes and 24, am I right, Larry? 24 duplexes. I'm telling you, the math always throws me off. Basically 50 dwellings. I just want to go back and show you another plan and another table that I had put together to try and just help people compare the project. So again, this particular plan you're looking at right now is the conventional plan. This is the alternative plan. This is the one with 32 units. And by the way, they all include ledge removal. Whether you do it in a conventional way or not, in order to develop the property, that's just the way it is. And there's nothing, this is just an acceptable form of development for land throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We have a lot of rock. So what I'm going to show you next, and I want to do a side-by-side for you, is our, and you're going to have to give me a little moment because I actually have to view, new window. Okay, here we go. This is a new tool I just used. I'm telling you, I'm not Zoom, all that Zoom savvy. I think I need Pat to help me as well. So here I wanted to do for you a side-by-side comparison because I think it's important because, people are constantly saying, well, maybe this shouldn't be developed. Maybe you should do something different. This land is going to be developed. The Riches want to develop it. They bought it for the purpose of development. They have the right to develop their property, but it should be done in a manner, and Mr. Smith believes this, and so does the Rich family, that it should be done in a manner that's cohesive with the town. So yes, is this going to be developed? Yes, it is. Do we want to do it in a respectful manner in partnership with the town? Yes, we do. And that's why we, the Chabaco Hill development team, is seeking to develop it as you see in the open space plan with 50 dwelling units and not in the conventional plan with 32 traditional single family homes. As you can see from the two comparisons, the dark green is basically the wetland. That would basically be the only area that would not be taken down of trees because you'd need to do that to be able to develop the project. This particular property would involve 3 wetland crossings, permanent wetland crossings, not temporary. The open space plan has no impact on wetland, and I'll go through that with you because there's this crazy idea that we're going to be damaging wetland when in fact we actually are preserving a 100-foot buffer. And that's why vernal pools have a 100-foot buffer and wetland has anywhere from, 0 to 100, but we're respecting 100 feet from the wetland areas. in the open space configuration. In the conventional plan, there would be 3 crossings. They're quite evident and you can see them. And some people would say, well, you're not entitled to do that. Almost certainly you are though, because what you can do, and I know the board knows this, is it's something called a limited project. I'm going to just talk about that for a moment. So what a limited project is under the DEP regulations and guidance, if you have a project that needs to be able, that is basically bifurcated by wetland, you are entitled pursuant to limited project standards regulations to access that upland. And that means you're able to fill wetland that is far beyond the 5,000 square feet typical performance standard. I know that's a lot of technical statements, but the long and short of it is the plan you see in front of you and the desire to actually fill those wetlands and create those crossings is permissible and would be something that the proponent, a proponent, not us, a proponent could in fact get approved from DEP. You have to meet certain performance standards still, but limited projects are very common in properties where you have to cross wetland to get access to open areas of upland. And as you can see on this plan, there is a tremendous amount of upland beyond the wetlands and all of these areas. So it's just something you'd be entitled to do. Or as long as you meet, again, the performance standards. So I just want to show you, what I did is I developed a chart because again, this is sort of to dispel some of those rumors that are just going around that simply are not true. And here's my comparison chart. Bear with me one moment because I have to actually figure out how to, yeah, I thought I would, okay. View, new window, okay. So here's my comparison chart. And what it does is it just kind of sets out for you the difference between senior housing and conventional. And the reason I did this is to be able to, again, provide you with a backdrop for when we actually have to go heavily into the regulations, because this kind of follows the purposes of the senior housing and addresses what the intent of the master plan is from the town. So what I simply did was go through the senior housing development and its features. So what are the requirements? There's a requirement under the senior housing, again, your master plan, to have market rate housing for seniors. There's need. As we all know, people are growing older. The average age is rising. The length of time people are alive is growing, thank goodness. And as a result, we need housing to accommodate people. And 55 and older does that. It provides, I think Mr. Smith touched on it, it provides that transitional layer for those of us who have these big homes, who don't want to live in them anymore, want to go for maintenance free, want a beautiful backyard, but don't want to have to take care of it. You don't want to have to worry about the roof, don't want to have to worry about the house siding. That's what a 55 and older does because it's a condo. The management company worries about it. So market rate housing for seniors. Obviously the senior housing provides for it. Conventional, none. Affordable component. Again, Mr. Smith touched on this. When you develop a cluster development, the town says to you, listen, you can do that, but we want you to give us some inclusionary, we want some affordable housing. So when you go through the bylaw, when you're 55 and older, you're not permitted to put affordable on site because it's considered to be prejudicial and discriminatory against families. So what your bylaw did, because we found this out during the Canterbury process, what your bylaw did and what you ended up rewriting and making it a better, for lack of a better term, more profitable for the Affordable Housing Trust formula yields about $1.4 million in payment. And Ms. Crouch, I heard you say that you're actually, I think, the chair or at least a member of the Affordable Housing Trust. And we plan on, now that this hearing is public and all information has gone to the public, we plan on filing a request to appear before your board just to discuss, you know, the $1.4 million that we'll be paying. Do you want us to pay that? Do you want us to do something else? We want to research that with you, and that's part of our plan. And that was in that narrative that I had submitted with the application. So basically also an alternative development style. Clearly, there's this desire in the entire world, smart development, cluster development, and everybody's saying, you know what, condensed development. I know with COVID, people want more area, but the truth of the matter is this type of development is still in keeping. It still allows people to maintain the integrity. It's not an apartment building, which means you have individual access points, individual outdoor areas. So this is like the beauty of it all. This allows you to have that condominium style. It allows more density in a consolidated place, so you have large areas of open space, which quite obviously single-family homes do not, right? I mean, it's not hard to understand that. I'm gonna see if I can put everything up so you can see it while I'm talking even. Let's see if I can figure out how to do that. I think I can, but bear with me one moment. I think I have the open space one. I want to put up the conventional, and then I just say it's a separate plan, new window. Thank you. Here we go. Okay. So just going to bring this down so that I can actually have the other one showing. And then, I'm sorry for this. I too have a little bit of technical difficulties in life here. Okay. So we talked about, I'm just showing you the plan so you can see how the two plans either attend to those issues or fail to attend to the issues. So we discussed the alternative development style. So essentially, with the development we're proposing, even though there are 50 units, we only have 100 bedrooms. You're in a senior housing development, you can only have 2 bedrooms. You can only allow people who are 55 and older to permanently reside, although you could have a 55-year-old person and a younger spouse. You could have a 70-year-old person and a younger spouse, but never can anyone under the age of 18 reside in the unit. That's impermissible. And if there were to be an emergency situation, we do provide for that because we know families have emergencies. So that is an option, but never is it a permanent situation that would otherwise allow a child to attend the public school. So that's what it is. It's only 100 bedrooms. In the single family homes, we would have anywhere from 148 to 160 minimum. So that's a 4 to 5 bedroom home. There are many 5-bedroom homes in the town of Hamilton and many in developments such as this. So open space, we are going to be preserving, as you can see in this green striped area, 50 acres of open space. We are going to provide trails. We are going to conserve. We are not impacting permanently a wetland. Yes, we're going to talk about it right now. So we did appear before the Conservation Commission and wanted to do requests for determination. That's a form of request when you aren't impacting the wetland, when you don't have permanent impact. But there was a lot of outcry, create more transparency, and our perspective was, let's just do the NOI. So we are, but we're not increasing. It's the exact same 3 projects as we have with the RDA. We're not proposing any permanent disruption to the wetland. We have simply one wetland temporary crossing to be able to, and I'm going to show it to you, to be able to get from our development area to our septic system, which is right here in one of those upland areas. Now, by right and by law, we can put in a permanent crossing. We would be permitted to do it, and it would be permissible. And we would just simply have to comply with the stormwater standards, and we can do that readily. But it's like we had said to the Conservation Commission, we have no desire to do that. There's no point to it, because what a permanent road would do in the open space would be to encourage motorized vehicles, whether permissive or not. We don't want it. We don't want snowmobiles. We understand this is pristine, and that's what we're encouraging, and that's why it's only a temporary crossing. I just want it made clear there is no permanent impact or damage to the wetland. That's another bit of information that we're destroying wetland. No way, we aren't. So that's a part. Let's go through. I want you to erase this so I don't have stuff in your face. However, on the conventional plan, you can see there'll be a bridge, there'll be a culvert, there'll be a crossing, there'll be impact, there'll be restoration. Everything will happen under a conventional plan because that's the only way to do a conventional plan. And obviously there's no open space in a conventional plan. It's people's backyards. And as we all know, you can attempt to control people in their backyards, but they're going to take down trees if they don't have any sort of restriction relative to a wetland. Other than that, those areas we show you will be cleared. The accessible public trails, we already talked about. It's about 5,000 feet of trail. So as you know, and we discussed before, they run from Chabaco all the way over to two different areas of Chabaco Woods, one being in the west, one being in the south. So there's a good trail system in there with potential to see all kinds of beautiful features. So we are also dedicated to conserving and reducing land consumption. I can't say that more. This is why this plan is developed like this. If you can tell when you look at our open space, we are preserving all of that tree line. This is intentional. When Mr. Smith said to Jeff and Brent, I want you to keep the natural trees. If you take them down or clear them, I'm only going to have to put more up. And as it is, we are proposing revegetation. When most of these people who are here this evening who are maybe not in favor of the project come to the conservation hearing, they're going to see a restoration plan even for an area that is adjacent to the septic system. And the reason for that is there's like this meadow back there that's already there. It's a meadow. What we have to do is take down trees to put in the septic system. So we're going to kind of substitute. There's going to be a meadow on the septic system, and we're going to try and revegetate, so we'll allow trees to grow in that meadow. So over the septic system, we'll mow once a year, so we keep the meadow. Meadows are exceptionally important to habitat because that's where birds basically nest, and we're going to keep those areas so that they can, in fact, do that. And again, Larry was very clear about leaving trees. As it is, Larry is still trying to revegetate area, and I'll show you a landscape plan later, or maybe not for this evening's meeting. And we're proposing 152 evergreen trees. And we're not proposing 3-foot trees. We're proposing very large evergreen trees. We're proposing, I think, 180 flowering and deciduous trees, and somewhere around 140, 150 shrubs. We're not afraid of landscaping. If you go look at Canterbrook, you can see that Larry embraces landscaping, because if you remember, that site was a scoured site. There was nothing there. And what Mr. Smith has done is gone in and revegetated, and he's committed to do that to the extent there's clearing in this area. He wants to revegetate, and in fact has designed a beautiful entry in this area. And the purpose of that is to ensure that the neighbors across the street have a pretty viewscape. And that's our intention. I'm going to undo this so I can erase. There we go. So that's the revegetation. I do want to talk about septic. So there's a lot of issues. Everybody's saying, oh, there's water shortages. We always have these bans. First and foremost, the bans are a direct result of the amount of water withdrawal you're permitted under your license. It doesn't mean you're having a drought necessarily. I just want to make that clear, because I know in my town I have signs all over the place, you can't water on these dates. That's just because we can't exceed a certain number, and they try to curtail the number. There's plenty of water for this particular subdivision to basically connect to the water. There is. And we have our Don Provencher, who is our water specialist, will come to the site and we'll discuss that with you. But let me just explain that the by right developments, which is this particular development, and when I say by right, what I mean is the land is permitted to be developed if you comply with all of the subdivision rules and regulations and you meet zoning. So that means by right. There is no special permit. This particular project, if you meet it, it will be approved, because that's the way subdivision control works. It is not a mechanism to deny, it's a mechanism to ensure that access is proper, safe, and adequate. That's it. That's what subdivision approval is. So this plan and the A&R plans, we just simply submit a plan showing that you have enough frontage and enough area, and it's done. And there are 6 of those on this lot, coupled with, as I said, because there's 6 of those and it's 32, so there are 26 other lots that are actually in the subdivision. Well, septic and water usage, that's how I got onto this. The senior housing development uses very little water. Why? Because out of all of these homes, 25% of them are occupied by a single individual. Believe it or not, one person will live in these homes at 25%. So somewhere around, 10 homes will be only one person. The rest of them will only be 2 people. It's 2 bedrooms even. That's temporary guests. It's really a 2-bedroom home. I mean, a 2-person home. So basically, the guidance under Title V is that if you have that, it's 150 gallons per unit. And that yields 7,500 gallons per day in that entire subdivision, that entire development. And by the way, the narrative provided by our water specialist says, even though septic requires that you have a septic system that can meet that kind of capacity, the real demand and the real consumption is half. So the anticipation is that half of that number is consumed. Now, if you go over and you look what could happen with the conventional plan, the conventional plan is 15,000 to 17,000 gallons per day. Teenagers use a lot of water, and that's what happens in single-family homes. That's why there's such a high demand. It requires 110 gallons per bedroom, per home, per day. And again, that number isn't 50%, that's really for senior housing, but it's still, the actual consumption number is less than the number shown, but that is still, just for comparative purposes, it's good to see that it's basically half. 50 units is half the water consumption of 32. The revegetation, I just spoke about a little bit, and then farmland oh, you know what I forgot to put? There's actually, sorry, I don't know where I put it. Okay. There's actually preservation of farmland. We talked about that. You know, we're going to keep the 9.4 acres of land for farmland open. I'll show you that in just a minute. Let's finish this and I'll show you it, and then I'll stop and I'll open it up to the board. I know you're probably tired of hearing me. So the farmland is being preserved. The off-site improvements. There's a wall on Essex Street. I know it's Chabaco, isn't it, Larry? Is it Essex or Chabaco?
No, it's on Essex. It's on Essex, and it turns on to Chabaco by a few hundred
That's
feet.
why. So and it's kind of in disrepair. So Larry wants to provide a benefit to the town in light of the fact that it needs to be repaired. He's there. He wants to repair the wall, and if there can be some planting, because it is close to wetlands, he wouldn't mind doing a little planting there as well. So I just wanted to make sure people knew we are going to repair that stone wall, and we're going to try and undertake other improvements. And as you can see, none of this happens with the conventional plan. Positive fiscal benefit. The benefits are excellent. I mean, look at, you know, the conventional plan, it's going to generate revenue, but what's its net revenue? So when you first move into those homes, typically people are just starting to have kids, then they'll start to have kids. So you'll have a little revenue generated, in the middle they won't have revenue positive, and then at the end they'll have revenue positive. So it's a low tax revenue benefit. And there's always a corresponding burden on the school, and there's always a corresponding burden for the infrastructure, because no matter what, you have to plow those roads. So those 5,000 linear feet of road in this new conventional would have to be maintained, plowed, and sanded by the town, as well as all of the infrastructure, which is stormwater management, maintained by the town. You look at the open space, the condominium plows, the condominium de-ices, the condominium maintains the infrastructure, and there are no children to burden the school system. So it is an excellent positive tax revenue generator. Town services, I just went through that. And enforcement and oversight. The only reason I bring this up is because people are always saying, well, how do we make sure that people don't infringe into the wetland? How do we make sure people are going to maintain their septic system? How do we make sure they aren't going to hurt me, you know, by doing things they ought not do? Well, if in a conventional plan, it's not, you have to go to court. And we all know that that's not the best, even though I'm an attorney, that's not the best way to go. Court systems are slow, they're archaic, and they don't always yield a benefit that's just. So that's the benefit, or that's the lack of benefit for the conventional. Now, with regard to the condominium, you have the full oversight of a condominium association with the power of fine. So you don't have to go to court. You just need to have the management company and the trustees tell people who are in that development that they violated a rule or regulation, and they can be fined. If they don't pay that fine, it's a levy or a lien against their home. It's a statutory form of enforcement that is statutory. There's nothing they can do. They can try and fight you, but if they demonstrate that you have violated one of the orders of condition, like somebody decides they want to go in the backyard and do something, well, we can fine them. Somebody decides they want to encroach into the open space under the open space plan in the senior housing, we can fine them. The septic system will be maintained by whom? By the trustees, who will have it inspected all the time, pumped all the time. Everything will be done properly. That's what I mean about enforcement and why that to me is a benefit. So I'm going to close up, but before I do that, if I may, I'm just going to show you the farmland picture because sometimes it's just nice to see that. Close that. There we go. So as I said, Ms. Rich and Mr. Smith have been very adamant that this property should have farmland. And again, you're a right to farm community, and having this bucolic site when you drive by and to see the farmland and to see the fields is part of the fabric of your community. We respect that and we're honoring that. And this particular parcel is going to be preserved. It will be part of the conservation restriction and it will be maintained as farmland. To the extent someone doesn't want to farm it, it will simply become open space. But we are entering into a long-term agreement with farmer. It will be farmed as long as we can help it. And if something were to happen 40 years from now and people didn't want to farm it, it isn't as if it would go back and be able to be developed. It will never be able to be developed. It will only be able to be used as open space. And based on all of those things, I would suggest strongly that the senior housing development is the preferred building style in this particular area. And I think that through this public process, we are going to demonstrate that we satisfy each and every one of those criteria, including the eligibility, the site distance. I'm not going to go through that tonight because I heard that Mr. Mitchell was going to actually have segments of the bylaw, but I do have, like the aerial plan showing you that there's no senior housing close to it and how we in fact meet all of the density. And just on closing, I would like to add that this particular parcel could have been split in half and still had a 50-unit development because as it is today, it under just this plain density requirements, it's eligible for 100 units. But because of certain limitations that were built in by the drafters appropriately, we're limited to 50. And with that, I will close our presentation purposes and turn it back over to the chairman, Mr. Mitchell. Thank you very much. I appreciate all your time this evening. I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay, thank you, Jill. The next segment, as I indicated earlier, the planning board members will have the opportunity to ask questions relative to the applicant's presentation. And we'll start with, and I'd like to move sort of in order so it's not random and we're jumping around. And I'd ask that people keep their questions specific to a specific issue and so that the applicant can answer that. And why don't we start with Jonathan? And please speak into the microphone directly.
Certainly. So the nature of my questions really were not the type of questions that necessarily need to be answered tonight, but more kind of additional information. So if that's okay, I'll proceed with that. One of the things that's interesting to me, because this site is so unique in its topography, is to see some site sections through the proposal. And it would be interesting to see a site section through the entire proposal that actually runs out to some of the abutters. So for example, out on Essex Street, just to give an example, number 288 Essex Street sort of fronts right on the field there and looks right back at the proposal. So a site section through something like that property up through the middle of the proposal would be informative. Same with over on Chewbacca Road, for example, number 16 Chewbacca Road, site section through that property and up through the proposal, say through Unit 50, which is at the top of the hill. And then another interesting site section would actually be through the entry, because I noted on the site grading plan, that the entry road rises up rather quickly. And so, for example, it would appear that the sidewalk in that area approximately 10 to 1 pitch in that area. So it would just be interesting to see site sections in that area. Then what I would also be interested in is the extent of blasting. It's a little bit unclear what the duration and amount of blasting is. In other words, how much ledge is being removed and how much material would be brought on or off the site, beyond the normal blasting plan. The other piece that I find would be useful is not to just understand the effect of blasting on the adjacent buildings, which is important and important to look at and make sure that it's something that is appropriate not just to the state regulations, but appropriate to the uniqueness of the site. But I wonder if it would be beneficial to have a hydrogeologic understanding of the effect of the blasting on the hillside, the stability of the hillside, the health of the trees, and the effect of the runoff from the top of the hill from portions of the proposal that are not subject to the stormwater management strategies. In other words, the non-permeable surfaces such as lawns and open space. Where is that water going and how quickly is it going there? I know that's a little bit of a vague question, but a hydrogeologic analysis would answer some of those questions. The other piece is there is quite a bit of steep slope area right adjacent to the edge of the buffer zone and abutting the proposed yards. And I would be interested in knowing a bit more about how that work is to proceed on that steep slope and what the revegetation strategies are and their relationship to the adjacent trees, both in terms of the construction process and the end result.
Excuse me, what kind of property was that you were mentioning? I couldn't quite make it out.
Hydrogeologic study,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
You said you used another term after that to describe the property, I think.
It's steeply sloped.
I can't hear it.
Steeply sloped.
Steeply
Steeply
sloped.
sloped. Yes, so a lot of these questions revolve around kind of the third dimension here. We're looking at the plan view of the proposal, and it'd be interesting to see more in the third dimension what its relationship is to neighbors, the abutting resource area, and the general behavior of water drainage beyond the stormwater management strategies. So then I have a question really for the board, which is my reading and understanding of the regulations is that this project is subject to GPOD review, and
You need to spell that out. Nobody knows what you mean by that.
Yes. So the resource area, the wetlands, is also part of the ground protection overlay district, groundwater protection overlay district. And my understanding is that if more than 1/3 of the total area of the property falls within the GPOD, that overlay district, that it must meet the requirements of the GPOD. And I know this is not the granting of body, the permit granting body of the GPOD permit, but we're tasked to look at those requirements. And that's more of a question for the board. That's all for now.
Okay, good. And if people feel comfortable when they're asking questions, maybe for clarity for both the board and the audience, you can remove your mask if the board feels comfortable with that. If not, we'll continue the way we're going. I just know from listening as somebody on a Zoom call, sometimes our voices get muddled, especially like Richard couldn't understand what you were saying. So if that's okay, as each one's speaking.
Rick, would you like us to respond to any of the comments, such as Jonathan or anybody else brought up, or come
Yeah,
back
I
with a
think that
later
would
time for
make
those
sense
answers?
rather than having to delay the whole thing. But I don't want to get into a big, long discussion here, but if you want to respond to specific question he had, that's fine.
Yeah, I think we can respond to the GPOD. Jill or Brent, do you want to respond to that?
Sure. So, Jill Mann, so we do know that there's a portion of the GPOD that's involved in the site. None of it is actually being developed. We kept all of the development areas outside of it. So the impact truly is the way in which we determine the density. And that was determined during the Canterbrook hearing and how the GPOD would actually be involved. So we did take that into account, and the stormwater management qualities are something that you have to meet, and that's really what the GPOD means. It doesn't restrict development, and it doesn't prohibit this type of activity, and we're not really altering anything in GPOD at all. So, thank you.
May I address that? Because I had the same issue that Jonathan had with respect to the GPOD. And my understanding is that if 1/3 of the property is within the GPOD, then the GPOD applies, and the Zoning Board of Appeals would then be a permitting agency for the project. So by my calculations, which I took from your memorandum, Jill, it would appear to me pretty straightforward that the GPOD does apply. So whether, and I'm not suggesting that you couldn't get your application improved before the Zoning Board of Appeals, but I think you would have to take that step.
May I? So it only applies in certain instances if you're looking for those certain types of relief. We are not. So just like with Canterbrook, it doesn't apply. We don't go before the Zoning Board of Appeals. The only impact, and I can give you a narrative on it if you want, but the only impact is actually that when we look at the GPOD in the R1B district, instead of having the R1B minimum lot size requirement met, when we determine density at 40,000, we go to 80, just like with Canterbrook. So this is exactly like Canterbrook, except Canterbrook's entire project was in the GPOD. So with regard to this particular project, we're outside of it. We're not doing anything in it. We don't need to get any relief from the zoning board. And I know, Ms. Crouch, I know it's oddly drafted, but the proper permitting board is actually the planning board.
Well, if you could address that, I would appreciate it, because my reading of the statute, and I admit that it was preliminary, would suggest that it does apply. And I think Mr. Poor came to that conclusion as well. So if you could give us chapter and
It does
verse on that.
apply. It's just that the uses as a senior housing development do not trigger the requirements to appear before the Zoning Board of Appeals. So the aspect that it triggers is that you would have to, when we determine the lot density, it would just mean we look at 80,000 square feet instead of 40,000 square feet, which still yields 50 units. But again, the GPOD is not being developed. It is 1/3 of the site. I mean, if we wanted to, we could have cut it off and still made 50 units, believe it or not. And there is no trigger to go to the ZBA.
Okay, just so we don't get mired in this, maybe you can provide a short narrative, just laying out your argument why it doesn't apply.
100%. I will deliver that to Mr. Rufford for distribution to the board. Yes.
Very good. Corey, I think you were about to speak.
Yeah. Take my mask off because I mumble enough as it is. I don't have that much on the first time out here. I'm looking through the application and I see a lot of the different exhibits coming up, and they're covering some of the things that we'll be interested to talk about. But one of the things, as we're pointing out things that we want to see, I'd be interested to know how this project's going to appear from particularly Essex Street at the corner of Essex and Chabaco. One of the reasons is, every house is facing backwards at that road, and it's a dominant road. But you've also talked about landscaping and increasing the tree count by, your mention was upwards of 400 trees of various types. So I'd just be curious as to how that gets covered up, how that resolves itself. You know, because looking at the backs of houses is not always that appealing, and as it stands, we'll be looking across 9 acres of farmland, so.
Okay. So that jibes with what Jonathan was asking for, some visual representations.
May I just make one tiny clarification? What I failed to mention is that it would be extremely useful to include the average height of the tree canopy cover between the adjacent streets and the proposal in their site sections. That's all.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
So what we'll do is we'll provide you, with one of those depictions where you can see, I think that's what you want, right? One of those cross sections, so I can show you when somebody's standing on Chabaco, standing on Essex, standing at 16 Chabaco and 288 Essex, and at the entrance, what that view looks like by giving you a person standing in the street. Is that correct?
That's correct, with the correct canopy
We'll
height.
take care of that. Yep.
Okay, Bill?
I would reiterate the need to see some elevations about how the ledge fits in with the wetland, and I think Jonathan's request for that is very well founded. I personally would like to see a lot more engineering done on terms of the impact on the GOPD. You can have test borings, you can do all sorts of tests to look at what's happening to the water underneath the surface. And given the sensitivity on this issue, I think that you should be prepared to pay for a significant engineering study on that to alleviate fears.
Can I just ask a question, Bill, just to get some clarification on that?
Okay.
So, just so the applicant knows what you're asking for, is there a specific technical document or test or something that
We should ask perhaps Dave Thompson to come in. Dave Thompson's letter has some suggestions in this regard.
Okay, well, he's certainly welcome to attend via Zoom.
Okay. The next question I have is, the town bylaw has a 50-unit cap per development, and I think this proposal has 50 units and then there's 6 units off-site for affordable? Or is there going to be a payment in lieu of?
Payment in lieu of is what they're
A
proposing.
payment in lieu of, okay. Because if it was going to be 6 units off-site, then that would exceed the 50-unit.
Well,
maximum.
no, because the development is separate from the, if they were to build separately, that's not part of the development. That's a payment.
Maybe we should have the town council weigh in on that? I think there's some disagreement
You
on
could,
that.
but it would be, that's fine. We could have town council or the planning board director weigh in on that, but
Okay.
that's fine.
And then lastly, I do think that this development will put a lot of pressure on Chabaco Road. And I don't know whether the petitioner has had any conversations with the town DPW about contributing to upgrading Chabaco Road, at least from the entrance of this development on out to Route 22. That probably should be necessary. There are parts of that road where it's hard for 2 cars to get by even. So that road is going to need some major upgrading, at least that portion of it, due directly to this development, and that's an issue that has to be addressed. There may even be need for a light at the intersection of the two with, perceivably 100 cars a day coming in and out.
Okay. There is a traffic study included in this. I don't know if you
Okay.
saw it.
Then that will do it.
Any more questions?
Nope.
Do they
More?
want to respond to anything?
Would you like to respond to any of that?
Sure. So with regard to the affordable units, the way it actually would work is we'd have 50 units and then we'd have to provide 6 of them would have to be affordable. It's not like we'd get 56 units. That isn't the way it would work. So you'd get pressure downward. And the reason why we're entitled to 50 and not just 44 is because the 50 you actually need to sell in order to give the town $1.4 million. So you wouldn't ask for there to be, if for lack of a better term, a cram down to 44 and pay the affordable contribution.
No, I understand that. I understand that.
That's just for point of reference. And as far as the impact on the water, we understand, and we do have a water consultant, and we'll address those issues as well when we go through the technical portions, Mr. Wheaton, most certainly.
Okay.
And we're going to provide you with that viewscape. At our next hearing, we're going to try and get those plans done for you.
Okay, Emil?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kevin Lynch, the MIT professor in the mid-'60s, wrote a book on site planning, which is a fascinating book, second edition. And he described what site planning, the key to site planning is, and it's more than just a collection of houses and roads and traffic lights or street lighting and so forth. But it's a system where everything is related to everything else. And I can see already on this particular project that we're going to have to get into a lot of depth on the the relationships of the various pieces to the whole. First thing I would like to do, Mr. Chairman, is to make a motion that the planning board arrange a time and date with the applicant landowner to make a on-site walk at 133 Essex Street for the purpose of becoming more familiar with the site conditions. So I would like to make that motion at this stage.
I would second that motion.
Well, that's certainly, the applicant has already indicated they would want to schedule that, and at the end of the meeting, before we move on to the next subject, then we can discuss a date and time to do that. Do you have any more questions?
Thank you. Just one little, one other little piece. We had some discussion, or I noticed some of the discussion on aging in place and so forth. And I just glanced at the site plan and just noticed that at a couple of places on the road system, roadway A and B, you have a grade there of about a 10% pitch on the driveway or the road coming in. And the sidewalk just adjacent to that, I assume, would be the same. And I was just curious that actually exceeds the handicap requirement of 8.5%, which also requires a handrail. So it's not illegal, but just a bit of irony in this, in the project. But I think at this time, what we'd like to do is get, as Jonathan brought up, and Corey and Bill, we're collecting information. I think that we hopefully can dig down a lot further as we get along into understanding more about the project. Thank you.
Okay, very good. I'll defer until the end. Marnie?
Yes, well, Jonathan stole my thunder to some extent about blasting, because I went through the maps in some detail, and I was unable to locate on any of the maps any particular indication where ledge was, but it's now my understanding ledge is everywhere. And on map number C39, it's not actually a map, it's a detail. It did list the results from 22 test pits, and the ledge is anywhere from 18 inches, at a depth of 18 inches to 7.5 feet. So it would seem to me that there's going to be a substantial amount of ledge removal, and I had, quite serious concerns about the blasting, not only its effect on structures on Chabaco Road and other areas, but on the trees, because clearly the vibrations, if they have the potential to affect the foundation of a house, certainly could have very serious negative impacts on the root systems of the very trees that you indicate you're intending to keep as a buffer. And similarly, if those trees are affected, then of course the wildlife is affected as well. So I have, a lot of questions as to the amount of material that is going to be removed from the site, what type of heavy equipment would be used to take that material off the site. I have concerns about the vibrations affecting the trees, and more seriously affecting the bedrock and how that might affect the groundwater. And, I think that some of my colleagues have been getting at the need for a hydrologic study to ascertain how this project can affect the groundwater because of the blasting. So that, of course, is something we can address in much more detail at a different time, but it was a very serious concern of mine. And then another question I had was with respect to the proposed payment to the Affordable Housing Trust, not surprisingly. In your memorandum, page 10, footnote 17, you set forth your calculation. I unfortunately was not able to find a source for the figures that you used for median income. In fact, I believe our bylaw refers to area median income, and so I obtained figures in my research that are different from yours. So for purposes of tonight's meeting, I would appreciate if you could identify the sources for your calculation.
Sure. So I thought I had, let me see.
You set forth the bylaw, which, and I will apologize for the town.
I'm gonna, honestly, I'm gonna have to just, I mean, when I had taken it out of the, I thought I had included it and then commented on it, Ms. Crouch, and I'm sorry, but I actually did go online. I asked for the median income for Hamilton, and that's not what I got.
Well, for fiscal year 2021, I was able to ascertain from a HUDuser.gov website that, and I multiplied 50% of the area median income by 2, and I got $94,000 for one person and $107,400 for two persons. But again, this is online research, and so I think it behooves everyone if we clarify this and identify, the most up-to-date source from HUD for area median income for one and two person families.
I'll definitely provide that to you. I have it in my file. I'm just trying to find it, and I apologize for not having it at my fingertips, but I just don't.
It's not something that has to be resolved.
And it does flex, because when I first came to the town with this project in, Larry, when was it? 2000, the very beginning, 2020 at some point, it was a different number.
It was in November 2020.
Yeah, November 2020 was a different number than when I actually had done it for the narrative. So I'm gonna have to go back. I'll pull that for you. And then I'll provide you with my research showing you where I got the number. Because the number is what it is. Whatever it yields, we're gonna pay, that's our number to pay.
All right, very good. Any other questions, Marnie?
And it will change, by the way, up until approval, or if the board so approves.
Right. Not at the moment.
Richard Boroff?
I don't have any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Patrick?
Most of my questions initially or comments were engineering related, and I know we have a third party looking at this already, so I'll reserve my comments until the professionals have a chance to take it.
Thank you.
Look at it. And the only one I would bring then otherwise is with the site logistics. And the area is quite large, but it's pretty tight construction area. So it'd be interesting to show a site logistics plan with all the temporary roads and access and staging that's required. I mean, it's a significant earth moving project, and the earth doesn't go when you put the shovel in the ground. There is some staging in areas that you need for laydown and things of that nature. And I'm sure it's been planned for, but it'd be good to see it would be good to see it on a site plan and just understand where those areas are and how they impact the surrounding space.
Okay.
That'd be it.
And the other, Patrick?
I think it would be super helpful, as was requested by Jonathan and others, to see the cross-sections at various locations in the site, particularly as it relates to the abutting areas that will remain the same. Those are always helpful. We had asked for that as part of Canterbrook too. I thought, that was certainly useful. I think, given the level of interest in the public trails or the public's use of trails, and a desire to see them continue over time, I think it'd be useful to have some detailed mapping to illustrate where the project will allow them to remain, where the project will be making changes to that. I also think that it's important too, obviously, to have a full evaluation of the existing municipal utility system that serves the site and how this project impacts upon it. I know that probably a lot of that's already been addressed heretofore, but I think that it's important that the board get into it, our DPW director look closely at it, and certainly our peer reviewer look at it as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I just have a couple of questions, and it relates to sort of the blasting question. It would be nice to show on the map the actual blasting zone. It may be, I don't know what the extent of the entire proposed development area is going to be required to be blasted, but it would be another component of that illustration would be helpful. And we've already done that. The other thing, I didn't see, and it may be because I failed to find it, a photometric plan in the illumination exhibit. The one I got had fixtures, proposed fixtures, but I didn't see a site photometric plan. It could be that it was there and I missed it. Did anybody else?
Yeah, it's there.
Okay, so I have some digging to do. All right, that was it for me. So unless the board has other questions, then we'll now turn it over to the public who's attending via Zoom. Patrick, do you have something to say? Patrick Rackett?
I have a request from an individual from Tobacco Woods. His name is Kent Wasepka. He is speaking for a number of the folks that are interested in this project. I think that he's compiled a lot of comments, and this should be very helpful for us. So his name is Kent Wasepka, and he'd like to be recognized to be able to speak.
Okay, bear with us while we link you in, and there you are.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, am I?
Sure,
are
and
you,
for the
can I
record,
speak? Am I ready to go?
yeah, Kent, for the record, can you identify your full name and address?
Yes, my name is Kent Wasepka. I live at 74 Tobacco Road.
Thank you.
Just across the street from Tobacco Woods and this proposed development.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you, Chair Mitchell, Mr. Ruffett, and members of the Planning Board for giving me the opportunity to speak. In addition to being in a butter, I represent over 2,000 local members of Save Tobacco Trails and Watershed. There are a great many environmental and legal reasons for you to deny the developer a permit. For example, the vast amount of bedrock blasting we heard about tonight and the question of where that blasted rock will go. The millions of gallons of annual septic waste and the question about where that septic discharge will go. The erosion impact of denuding a mature forest, not to mention the violation and exploitation of multiple sections of Hamilton's senior housing bylaw. I'm not going to talk about these points. We have two very capable experts speaking after me or on our behalf, if it so pleases the committee, who will go into these deficiencies in detail. Instead, I intend to focus my brief comments on describing the damage this development would do to the nature of our rural neighborhood, trails, and the risk to our wells and drinking water. I lived in the area around Tobacco Woods for over 20 years. It's one of the most rural parts of Hamilton. My quiet street is used more by dog walkers and cyclists than cars. From April until November, there are people fishing in Beck's Pond from the side of the road. People literally stop along the road to chat. We have a total of 28 homes in our neighborhood. The proposed development would almost triple that number. The Hamilton Senior Housing Bylaw requires that any development, quote, be compatible with the character of the neighborhood in which it is located, end quote. I can't imagine how someone could argue this development follows that requirement. The Senior Housing Bylaw also requires any new development to, quote, protect natural features and environmental values. The developer plans to clear cut over 20 acres of trees and wildlife habitat and engage in, as we heard tonight, large-scale bedrock blasting. The developer will tell you, in addition, that he's preserving the walking, hiking, biking trails. So that, of course, is untrue. There are at least 6 trails in these woods that have been continuously and notoriously used for decades. The developer ignores these trails, saying they don't exist. So I actually emailed, I don't know if you have a copy of it, but I emailed a couple of maps to Mr. Reffett earlier today. If you do have them, you can take a look at some of the trails that are on the property that go from Chabaco Woods that have been used in the property for some time. The Essex County Trail Association, the New England Mountain Bike Association, alltrails.com. Oh, I just lost my screen, so I'm just gonna go back.
No, we're putting up the trail maps.
Oh, hey, thank you very much.
Is this what you're referring to?
It's the trail map. There's a Gordon Loop trail map, and there's also one from Essex County Trail, but the Gordon Loop trail map is great. So as I was saying, the New England Mountain Bike Association, the Essex County Trail Association, alltrails.com, northshorenature.com, even TripAdvisor all say these exist. As I said, I submitted these two maps that you can see. These are just 2 examples of the ubiquity of maps showing actively used trails on this property. Now, when the developer said, when I said the developer doesn't recognize the existence of these trails, it wasn't exactly right. During her presentation, Jill Mann highlighted the green dot trail. She didn't call it that, but that's what it is. The green dot trail as something they plan to preserve. What she didn't say is that their plan is to turn that trail into a utility road for the septic system. So their plan for preserving the trail is a septic utility road. I just ask you, would you walk your dog on a septic utility road? The other existing trails are to be unmade, bulldozed for the 50 luxury condominiums. My last comment is a quite personal one. As is the case with most of the homes on Chabaco Road, we use a well for our drinking water. It's super clean and it tastes great. By our estimate, we haven't heard the numbers from the developer, but by our estimate, the developer plans to blast tens of thousands of cubic yards of bedrock right across the street from my home, from my property, approximately 125 feet from my home. When the blast guy earlier was talking about the closest affected structure, he was talking about my home. So I was concerned before this presentation, his presentation. I'm more concerned now. When my home is blasted, my recourse is apparently to file a complaint with the fire department. And this is sufficient? I'm particularly concerned about the impact of this blasting on the integrity and safety of my family's water supply. At a minimum, I urge you to require a hydrology study on how this development would affect our neighborhood's drinking water. The proposed development is in no way compatible with the existing rural neighborhood. It does not protect natural features or the environment. And I can tell you that my neighbors, people living on Beck Pond, Chabaco Lake, and downstream, are all very worried about the safety of our water supply if this development is allowed to proceed. Please consider my family's safety in your decision. Thank you for your time and consideration. And if it pleases the committee, I would love to be able to turn it over to our legal counsel, Deb Ellison, for some further comments.
Yeah, go ahead. So we'll have to link her in, just so take a minute.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Go ahead, you're on.
Thank you very much. Deborah Ellison, Ellison Law Office, 63 Middle Street, Gloucester. I represent Tobacco Woods and Trails, and tonight I would like to highlight some of the more significant legal issues that are raised by this project. There are certainly many more questions and concerns, and as we proceed through the hearing process, we expect that there will be many opportunities to address the plans in more detail and to ensure that every aspect of the development is properly and thoroughly vetted. There are three areas that I would like to address tonight. One is the inclusionary zoning requirements under 8.3. Second is the senior housing requirements and the required findings under 8.2.16.3 and 8.2.31.2. Also, the status of the Anrad and the notice of intent. With regard to the inclusionary housing, the developer has proposed two options: funding the construction of 6 units or a payment in lieu. And the total amount that they've calculated is approximately $1.4 million. To be paid in 5 installments over the course of the development. And it'll provide approximately $235,000 per unit to cover both land acquisition and construction costs. It's unrealistic to believe that this amount of money will result in 6 affordable units. It's not enough money to pay for the land and the construction costs. And unless the developer is required to construct the units themselves, there's no certainty that these units are going to be developed. Because the money comes in over time, it'll be many years before you actually receive those funds. The developer is in essence putting the burden on the town to construct, market, sell and operate and manage these units. It's a lot for the town to take on. The town has limited resources, as you know, and it doesn't have the staff to devote to that type of an endeavor. It's not surprising that the developer would prefer not to do that itself, but you should think about how many units has the town in the past actually constructed itself? Are there any? Does the town have the experience and the staff to do that construction? And under the proposed installment plan, as I said, it will take many years for those to develop. You also have to remember that this is the planning board's decision. It's not the developer's decision. Although you can take recommendations from the Affordable Housing Trust, it's also not their decision. And in the bylaw, the default provision is for the developer to construct the units on site. And the developer has presented a reasonable argument as to why that does not make sense, because your units, those affordable units, wouldn't be counted towards your state levels or your inventory if they were constructed on site. But that's the default, and that's what you need to look at. So if they can't be constructed on site, they should be constructed off-site by the developer. And this goes to the whole question under 8.2.6.2, which was brought up as to the number of units that the developer is allowed to develop. If these affordable units are on site, as is the default provision of the bylaw, then they would still have a maximum project size of 50 units. The fact that they're constructed off-site shouldn't change that. There's nothing that says that if they construct them off-site, all of a sudden they're allowed to have 6 more market units on site. So I would suggest that it would be important to have town council take a look at that issue, look at the zoning bylaw to see what is the maximum number of units that will be allowed in this project. With regard to the senior housing requirements and affordability under 8.2.16.3, the zoning bylaw requires that they all be moderately priced, affordable, and market rate housing, and that there be a variety of building types, a mix of small, medium, and large, and a range of selling prices. What you have in front of you doesn't do any of that. You have luxury units. They're $800K list price, not the sale. That's not the sale price even. The sale price is likely to be much higher and would be market rate. So the MLS data that we presented in my memorandum shows that the median price in Hamilton for a single family is $682,000. The condos are higher at $836,571, and that's largely due to the Canterbrook Farm coming online. So even if they offer these units at a lower price, the market will drive the price up. So despite the zoning bylaw requirement that there be a mix of housing, what you have for senior housing in Hamilton, you already have 2 luxury projects, and now you're being asked to approve another one. This is within the board's authority to require a mix of unit types and prices. And of course, the developer would prefer to be at the high end of the market, but that's inconsistent with what your zoning bylaw was designed to do. And this is one of your last opportunities to do that. After this project is developed, there are very few units left that can be developed under that bylaw. Also, the median income in Hamilton, according to the developer's documents, is $78,000 approximately. That person is not going to afford a $800,000 to $900,000 condominium. Going on, the planning board is required to make certain findings under the bylaw. Under 8.2.31.2, they have to make a finding that the project will mitigate impact to abutting land and natural resources. And that's where it comes, the blasting issue becomes very important. And what is this going to do to the surrounding properties and the surrounding wells and the aquifers that serve many communities? The developer shows you a conventional plan, and it's a conventional plan that obviously is at an extreme. They show 3 wetland crossings, and they say we're certainly able to do that. And I think respectfully that it's unrealistic to think that those would be permitted. I would suggest that in addition to the other peer reviews that you may have, you would want someone to take a look at this conventional plan and determine really how realistic it is. I'd also question whether the soils would support septic systems for the 32 lots that they're proposing. And it is important to remember that the project is in the groundwater protection overlay district. And it's irrelevant that the so-called development lot is outside of the GPOD. This is one lot, it's one site, so the entire lot is impacted. And you do have to look to the provisions of the GPOD. Now, I would agree with Attorney Mann that a special permit is not required, but I would suggest to you that it is important to still look at the GPOD requirements and to make sure that, because you have to look at what mitigating the impact of abutting land and natural resources, that you should look at what this project will do and whether it will adversely affect the existing or potential quality or quantity of the water that is available in the GPOD. As I said, the 3 municipalities draw from this aquifer: Hamilton, Manchester by the Sea, and Essex, plus numerous private wells. And one thing you should understand is that this does need, as several people have said, a hydrogeological study. The hydrogeological study looks at what is under the earth. The hydrology study will look at the surface water. So the applicant has, when they went through their project team, listed that they had hydrologists. What you really need in this situation, because of the blasting and because of the significant ledge, is a hydrogeologist. And Tom Hannigan from Ransom Consulting can address that more thoroughly in a moment. Lastly, I'd like to mention the Anrad and the notice of intent. It's important to note that there's no approved Anrad at this point, and no notice of intent has been submitted to the Conservation Commission. Without the Anrad and the NOI approval, the project location and the scope are not yet fixed. You need information to adequately assess the project and to know what you are evaluating will be the actual project that's approved. The extensive resources of the town are going to be expended on the review of this project, and you're entitled to know the location and the scope before you make a decision. So I would suggest that that information from Conservation is very important for you to review. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and otherwise I will turn it over to Tom Hannigan from Ransom Consulting.
Okay, thank you for your remarks, and we will now turn it over to the next consultant. And what was his name again?
Tom Hannigan.
Tom Hannigan.
Tom could raise his hand.
Can you raise your hand, Tom Hannigan?
Hi, good evening. Can everybody see and hear me okay?
Yep, and then just for the record, identify yourself and the firm you represent.
Absolutely. My name is Tom Hennigan. I'm the senior practice leader for our civil engineering group at Renton Consulting. On behalf of Save Shabaka, we had reviewed the engineering plan submitted by the applicant, and I'll just share some of our notes and findings on that. I know that the board will have their own peer reviewer looking at the application as well, and some of these items may be somewhat repetitive to what we've talked about before, but they are the kind of important and pertinent issues for the project. The first item I just wanted to talk about was erosion and sedimentation control. In the senior housing bylaw, there's a statement that general soil erosion of the proposed development site should be minimized by integrating the development into existing terrain by reasonably retaining natural grades and soil cover. So as we've talked about, there's a significant amount of ledge on the site, and there's also, it's a large earthwork project with some of the cuts ranging over 20 vertical feet. So there's a lot of material that's going to be moved around, and obviously as we do that and disturb the natural soil cover, there's going to be lots of potential for erosion. So that's just going to be an important issue to make sure the board is comfortable that there's controls in place. Additionally, as someone mentioned earlier, within the grading plan, the applicants tried to condense everything to keep everything outside the 100-foot buffer for the wetlands. But as you look at the plan, you'll see that wherever there's any type of slope, there's, those slopes typically are 3 to 1. So they're pretty steep. So those slopes range from both being a cut slope to being fill slopes. And I think it's important for the, for the stabilization of the site that those information be on the plans about how those fill slopes are constructed, just to make sure that they're stable and protecting both, the downstream, locations where the wetlands in the 100-foot buffer zone is downstream from, or down gradient from those slopes, as well as where they're right up against some of the proposed housing. Next item was just soils and material management. As one of the planning board members had suggested, it'd be good to see some cross sections as well as, just kind of a little bit more information on the cut and fill, so we can understand, how that earthwork is going to be conducted, in, especially in a phased approach. With the other item that's not really discussed, be important to know is, we looked at it, obviously we were just going off the PDF plans, but did kind of a rough kind of volume estimate. It appears that the site is a net cut, meaning that the extra material generated from the grading plan. So it's important to understand, as that rock is blasted, what happens with that? Is it going to be hauled off site? Is it going to be processed on site and used for aggregate? And just understand what the, operations are for the site, and if there's other noise or dust or other issues that just need to be addressed or conditioned. We've talked a little bit about the need for a hydrogeological study. Based on the test pit information that we have, it looks like there's several places where the existing grade is going to be cut down. Again, in some places more than 20 feet. And based on the information that's in the test pits provided by the applicant, that those elevations will be cut down below the elevation where groundwater was observed in the test pits. So it's important to know what the impact of the project will have, and and obviously the blasting and removal of bedrock will have on the existing groundwater flow patterns on the site, and how that impacts the water supply. Tree clearing, we've talked about that. Obviously, based on the grading plan and the way that has been prepared, there's really not an opportunity to preserve existing clusters of trees within the development. It'll be a full tree removal within the developed area. Additionally, I think it's important to look at the area leading out to the septic system. Talk about the septic system a little bit in a second, but there's currently no real clearing or improvements proposed on that path leading out to the septic system. And obviously with the construction of that system, there's going to be material that's going to have to be both brought in and removed. And it's really going to be important to have an understanding whether that existing path is going to be able to support that construction without any improvements. And if improvements are required, based on the size of the trucks and equipment that needs to get through there, is there going to be additional tree removal necessary in that area? And then lastly, like I said, just a septic system, based on the plans. I haven't seen the full septic system design, but just based on the plan view included in the planning board application. There are two 38 by 81 foot septic fields that's going to require, both select granular sand material to be brought in, as well as, the material that's going to have to be native material that's going to have to be removed. So as I mentioned, it's going to be important to know, the amount of truck trips that will be required at that stream crossing, to ensure that existing path can support the traffic there. So really quickly, based on those comments, we just had a summary of recommendations of additional material that we'd like to see or would recommend that the board request. As we talked about, a hydrogeological study to confirm that the existing groundwater flow patterns at the site won't be adversely affected by the blasting and removal of material. One of the other items was I talked a little bit about the slopes, and everything looks like it fits in well right up to that 100-foot buffer zone. But in some places, those slopes are range from anywhere from 10 to 20 vertical feet. And if there's any issues or erosion issues during construction or after construction, there's no access along the toe of the slope up against that clearing line to get to the bottom of that slope for maintenance. So we'd just like to have some confirmation on what the plan is for long-term access and maintenance in those areas, as well as ensuring that there's adequate maintenance access to the different stormwater infrastructure pieces, the different ponds and other elements proposed. Again, just the plan included erosion controls, typical erosion control, soil socks, and things of that nature. And again, with the phase construction and a large earthwork effort, just making sure that there's adequate erosion controls, and where there's a lot of upgradient soils that just a silt sock can easily be overwhelmed, with a large sedimentation load that may come down in a heavy rain event. And those things do happen during construction. Lastly, this was previously recommended by one of the board members, but a cut fill plan is recommended to clearly show the extent of the cuts and fills, and again, how any of that, if there's surplus material, how much of it will there be, how much material will be hauled off sites, and during construction, what's the impact with regard to truck trips and that sort of thing. Lastly, would just be an interim grading plan. We talked a lot about the blasting and just really what, as you cut down that bedrock knob out of the site, really what's the interim grade going to look like? And I think that would help as part of that hydrogeological study to really understand how the soil profile changes on the site. So that's all I have for now. Happy to answer any questions with regard to those comments.
All right, thank you so much. And if that's the end of the comments and the board doesn't have any specific questions for him, I'd like to, go ahead.
May I have a general comment about his questions, his comments?
Sure, just make them brief because we want to get to the public.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, it's easy. Most of the comments that this gentleman brought up, am I wrong in saying that they really belong in the purview of more of the building inspector than the planning board?
Yeah, you would be wrong. Specifically, the board has a wide purview to request and understand what the impacts are of this development, just as we did with Canterbrook and Patton Ridge. Many of the concerns came up as it relates to GPOD and the impact on the Osage River. So yeah, these are within the bounds of the planning board.
Okay, thank you.
So now we open it up to general questions from the public. Pat Norton, how are we going to do this? Because I see we have a number of people who've raised their hands and have questions.
Yeah, I guess I would suggest we go to the folks with the raised hands, and then if there's Q&A that anyone can address, or we can make note of the Q&A and address it.
Okay, so you're suggesting people who have questions should raise their hand, and then we will recognize them in the order we receive it.
I'll just go down the list here.
All right, so we'll go down the list. So give us a moment while we connect you.
That's the Vandies, I think.
Hello?
Hold on one second.
Yep.
There we go. And for the record, please state your name and address.
Hi, my name is Katie Vandy, and I'm representing my family, Ron Vandy, Kevin
And
Vandy,
your-
and Michael Vandy, who are the owners of Meadowbrook Farm at 247 Essex Street.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and I want to thank you and Chair Mitchell for the opportunity to speak and address you in the community as a family and small business owner in Hamilton with regards to the proposed development on 133 Essex Street. We wish to take this opportunity to provide clarity to the board members and the community on our position as it relates to the proposed development project, as well as clear up some statements made at past Conservation Commission and Planning Board meetings. We recognize the overwhelming public concern to this development within the community and are conscious of the fact that any position we take could substantially impact our business. Given recent activity, we wish to set the record straight and publicly state that we have not entered into any agreements with Mr. Larry Smith or Ms. Kathy Rich Duvall. We have specifically stated to them that our position with regards to this proposed development is one of neutrality. Any such mention of Meadowbrook Farm or the Vandy family being in alignment with Restoration Capital, Shabacco Hill Capital Partners, or Ms. Rich Duvall are unwarranted and untrue. We have submitted in writing to them that they are not to use our name or our business in any way to promote or support their proposed development, as was mentioned in a past planning board meeting on April 6, 2021, and was inferred at a Conservation Commission meeting on June 23, 2021. At the April 6 planning board meeting, Ms. Jill Mann stated while discussing a proposed trail system that, and I quote, "This trail will provide access to the farm stand. If we are allowed, we will create some sort of access point so that people can go to the farm stand," end quote. This proposal was the first we had heard of our private property and business being utilized in this way by the developers. We would like to mention that not only is Meadowbrook Farm a private business, it is also the private residence of my father, Mr. Ron Vandy, who lives there year-round. We have since asked Mr. Smith and Ms. Rich Duvall to please ask for our permission before using our family or our business name to support or promote their development. At the June 23rd Conservation Commission meeting, several statements were made by Mr. Hawksmith, an engineer hired by Mr. Smith, that we would like to correct. Mr. Hawksmith inferred that Mr. Ron Vandy provided him with detailed information about the property's history, specifically regarding road access to the area where the proposed septic will be. The history of the property is a matter of public record, and Mr. Vandy is not responsible or accountable for providing such information to Mr. Hawksmith. These statements provided a misleading perception to the public and directly goes against our previous request to ask for our permission before using our family or business to promote or support their development. In April of 2021, Ms. Rich Duvall presented us with documents regarding a perpetual easement on our property at 247 Essex Street in South Hamilton. This easement was unlimited in time and scope and allowed for continued and unmitigated access to cross our property to access the portion of the 133 Essex Street property, which plans show as a location of the development's proposed septic system. Several weeks later, Mr. Smith had presented us with a 99-year lease on the farmland at 133 Essex Street once he obtains ownership from Ms. Rich Duvall as part of the sale. However, it was made clear to us that this proposed lease agreement would only be available to us if we signed the perpetual easement. Throughout our discussions with Mr. Smith and Ms. Rich Duvall, we have repeatedly requested more detailed information about the proposed development, given our private property and farmland are direct abutter to this project. Specifically, we have asked for information related to the proposed septic system planned for just beyond our agricultural property and uphill from our irrigation pond, where Ms. Rich Duvall's easement would provide access to. Considering the obvious and direct impact this easement would have on our land and business operations, including the lack of information, detailed plans, and data to support the safety and integrity of our agricultural land, agreeing to such a document at the time asked would not have been prudent. Unfortunately, our decision to not sign these documents led to the termination of our long-standing land and agricultural lease with Ms. Rich Duvall. This lease has been in place for decades, dating back to the previous owners of Meadowbrook Farm well over 60 years ago.
Our past lease agreement was always mutually beneficial as we paid our rent on time and maintained the agricultural property throughout the duration of our lease with the Rich family. As farmers, we have adhered to strict organic practices for decades to actively preserve and respect the precious aquifer system under the agricultural fields. Our main concerns stand in relation to how this proposed development would potentially contaminate our irrigation pond, the agricultural fields, and the water supply. Our family and business have remained in good standing within the community, and we intend to keep it that way as the next generation strives to take the reins. We have always had positive working relationships within the town of Hamilton and have been proud to serve its residents for over 40 years. I want to thank you for this opportunity to inform you of the facts as they pertain to our farm, our family, and the potential environmental concerns this development may hold. Thank you so much for providing us the opportunity to speak at this time.
All right. Thank you so much for your remarks. We very much appreciate it. And then we'll move on to the next person that would like to ask a question or make a comment.
I'm not on it.
They're probably waiting to download it.
No, I don't want it. They're asking me to be on it.
Okay, Wendy Richardson, I think we're trying to connect with you.
I think she should know that we can hear her.
Say again?
We can hear her if she wants to speak, if they want to speak.
We can hear you if you'd like to make a comment. Is this Wendy Richardson? Pat? Is that Wendy Richardson that we're...
It's right here.
Yes, Wendy Richardson, would you like to make a comment?
Not at this time.
Okay, we're going to move on next to the next person.
Rudy Pisano.
Say again?
Rudy Pisano.
Rudy Pisano.
Good evening.
Yeah, we've got you.
Good
Welcome.
evening, everyone. Thank you very much.
Could you state
Thank
your
you for
name
everyone
and
who's
address, please?
participating. Just briefly, I just want to...
Your name and address, Rudy?
77 Essex.
Thank you.
Right down the street, about a half mile away. So I first want to support the comments of the Vandy family. We've known them for almost 30 years. And I think it's a shame that their lease got terminated. When you talk about trust, you talk about people who fed us throughout the pandemic, and to be cut off like this, I think it's just a crying shame. Now, when I looked at the presentation of Attorney Mann, I found it very misleading. The affordable unit requirement applies to subdivisions. So a 32-unit subdivision, by my reading of the statute, the bylaw, means that there needs to be 4 affordable units on site. That was left out. What was also left out, and I think someone else brought up, was the fact that 50 units are no longer available under the bylaw. I brought that up 3 weeks ago, and I think it really deserves to be looked at. Last of all, when you're comparing housing development to subdivision, none of those lots, to my knowledge, have been perked. So they don't conform to Title V, to my knowledge. They also, the Ground Protection Overlay District hasn't taken a look at it. So I think you're just setting up this straw man and saying, oh, look what's going to happen if we don't rush to approve this. all these terrible things are going to happen. There's not going to be any affordable housing, when that's just not the case. So now let me just go back to when we approved this back in 2008. We were told that this was a way to get affordable housing for seniors. And, back then it was a theory. Now, for me, it's a reality, because I turn 65 next year. And I wonder, the night we approved this, if somebody said, well, 12 years from now, someone's going to blow up the hill behind Meadowbrook Farm and put in 50 luxury condominiums for $1 million a piece. I'm kind of wondering, and you guys should think, because I know some of you are newbies in town, some of you have been here forever. Would you have voted for this if you knew that we'd be here talking about this 12 years from that date? I don't think any of you would, if you knew that it was going to come to this. It was going to come to a farmer who studied agriculture at UMass, has spent his whole life on the land, getting his farm terminated for $50 million condos. I think it's a crying shame. And I hope you folks, the planning board, you can look at the law, but you can follow your head, but follow your heart. Because I think if you follow your heart, you're going to come to the right conclusion on this project. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments, and we'll take the next.
Doesn't look like there's any more hands raised.
So,
There are Q&A questions.
so nobody else has raised their hands who would like to participate directly via Zoom. So we have a list of questions that we can try and read through. Let's see if I can read them well. Self-contained and
Let me blow it up a little bit.
fiscally positive to the town. What about the demand on the watershed? This year is an odd one, but many years we run out of water in the summer. Yep, I think that's a general concern that people have, and we will dig down and deeply into finding out about water consumption as well as the impact on the watershed. Wouldn't the best way to save the land to sell it to a conservation, not someone who wants to profit by off of destroying the watershed? Well, that's a nice rhetorical question, but we're dealing with an applicant who is proposing a specific project. What is an A&R lot? Good question. That's an approval not required. When under subdivision law, if somebody comes in with an existing piece of property that's properly zoned, they can do whatever they want with on that land in terms of constructing residential dwelling, as long as it meets the specific zoning within that zone. How many houses will need to be surveyed? How many? I'm guessing that relates to the blasting question. That's a good question. I can't answer it, but maybe at the next meeting, the applicant can respond to that specifically. Are there various plans that can limit blasting? That's a very good question, and one I have personally. I'd like to see what are the techniques that they're proposing, and it would even be instructive for me and the board and probably the public if there are any videos that exist of the proposed type of blasting so that we can see a visual. Okay, can you talk about the runoff into the current wetlands and blasting impacts to the animals? Well, we're certainly going to get into detail. They've already submitted a drainage plan. Say again? Oh, I thought I heard somebody. They've already submitted a plan describing in detail how they're going to contain runoff, but we will get into that definitely in more detail. We understand the benefits of preserving the character of the farmland and the landscape. Has the development team looked at the impacts of blasting on the character of the landscape they are developing? There is tremendous value to the overall design of your housing and neighboring environmental neighboring environment by limiting the blasting? Is that a possibility? Is this a goal of doing part of the design development? Yes. We'll certainly be asking detailed questions about the extent of blasting, the nature of blasting, the term of blasting, the impact of blasting. So we will be getting into it in much more detail. So stay tuned. Are there proposed plants native? If they aren't, will they provide better benefit to the insects that would need those trees as hosts? They will be required to submit, and we will discuss in detail a landscaping plan, and they will provide detail on exactly what plants, bushes, trees, and other vegetation they will be planting. So that is part of the plan. Please note that the comparison chart, should reflect that our inclusionary bylaw also applies for any subdivision of the size of the conventional alternative. Thus, the conventional alternative should still be shown, reflecting some funds for affordable housing. I think we'll get into that, and that was a question asked earlier by the attorney, is the comparison between those two, and we will get into it. May we see the map, please? Not sure what map we're referring to, so I can't answer that question. We're not seeing the map online. That could be due to a problem on your end, because we're seeing the maps that are being presented, and I think most members that a community are online are seeing that. But if you need maps, you should actually email Patrick, and we can provide maps in hard copy or via electronic means. Should the town of Manchester be involved, since this also impact their watershed? Good question, Patrick. Refit, can you address that?
I will make sure that they're invited to our next meeting.
Okay. Can someone address and explain why they cannot build affordable units on site per mass law because it's senior housing? I can attempt to do that. Jill did so, and we'll get into that in more detail in future meetings. Is senior housing, as I understand it, and Jill, I'm sure, will correct me if I'm wrong, or other members will. Senior housing affordable senior housing on site cannot exclude family and children. So the preference of developers is to pay in lieu of to the affordable housing trust, so they preserve senior housing over 55 persons on that site. Did I get that correct?
You did. The state is pretty adamant about making sure that affordable housing is not age discriminated against.
Okay.
So the idea of having a senior housing project, excludes ages underneath 55. There have been some willingness from the state to allow projects that require 62 and over to be considered as affordable, but most developers choose not to do that.
Okay, thank you. How much would Larry Smith want to buy this land? I don't know, and that's not a question we can ask, actually. We have to, and I think this is a good question, to the extent of our ability to ask questions, they really relate to the specifics of the bylaw and the requirements of the bylaw, not the financial transaction. Are the towns of Manchester and Essex involved with the impact on their water supplies? And as you just heard, Patrick Refit, Director of Planning and Inspections, will notify them and make sure they're aware of this project. will they be required to show a detailed phasing plan that includes how blasting and stormwater and erosion will be completed for each part of the phasing? Yes, and their stormwater plan actually does describe that in detail, but we'll get into more during the hearings. We'll get into asking that question and drilling down in more detail on that. Is there a side-by-side comparison of the Canterbrook approved built housing with this project in terms of quantity of different size units and costs? And does it make sense to build 3-bedroom senior housing, as typically there is an average of 2 people per household? I'm sure that Larry Smith could provide photos to compare the approved housing there against what he's proposing. That will be up to him to do so. The senior housing bylaw limits any housing to 2 bedrooms, so there cannot be 3 bedrooms under this senior housing bylaw, so those are specifically excluded. I would like Patrick Reffett to read my letter to the planning board from last Friday, please. Okay, Patrick.
That's the last question.
That was the last question, yes. So Patrick is looking for that.
I actually I had to have a copy of it.
Is that the letter that Patrick sent out?
Yeah, I
Mr.
did
Anrad?
send that out this afternoon.
Yeah.
Patience, please, while we try and find an electronic copy of that letter.
Is that the letter about eminent domain?
I'm not sure the title of that letter. We have a couple, oh, wait a minute, is this it? I'm guessing the referral, we've got it up on the screen so people can read that. I can read it if people want me to read it. I will read it just to make sure that if people are listening by phone and don't see it, then I will do so.
I'll give you a break. I'll read it.
Oh, thank you.
Dear Mr. Mitchell and board members, as a method of introduction, I'm Kathy Rich Duvall, one of the owners of 133 Essex Street, Hamilton, Massachusetts. I am writing this letter on behalf of my brothers and I to support the proposed project before you by Chabaco Hill Capital Partners, LLC, i.e. the village at Chabaco Hill. My parents purchased the land in the mid-late 1950s, along with another parcel for the purposes of future development. My father, Frank Rich, was a building contractor and real estate developer and kept this piece for a special purpose. Throughout the years, my parents met with neighbors, town officials, and the Hamilton community to bring their development visions to fruition and share those visions with the community. While my dad was gracious in permitting reasonable public access to the land and temporary agricultural use of a portion of it, he was always very clear about his intentions to develop the property, for which he continued to pay full real estate taxes as developable land from the inception of his ownership in the late 1950s. Since my dad's death, our family has continued to pursue the development of the property while paying full real estate taxes with no agricultural tax reductions or conservation easements. We are thrilled to be working with Larry Smith and his development team. Their proposed development is one that builds beautiful 55-plus senior housing homes, preserves many acres of farmland, proposes a large portion of the property for open space, parentheses, up to 49 of the 66 acres as open space, in parentheses, supports the financial needs of the town of Hamilton and meets the vision of our family. I look forward to a meeting the board members at the next meeting. Very truly yours, Catherine Rich Duval.
All right, very good. I think that ends the public comment question section. I don't see any other questions coming up, and I very much appreciate the public participating via Zoom. It's an imperfect tool, but hopefully we'll get better with it over time. I thank everybody for their patience as we are on a learning curve to use this tool. And
Mr. Mitchell, I hate to interrupt, but I think Kathy Rich Duval actually raised her hand. I apologize for the interruption.
No problem. We'll try connecting her right now.
Be able to hear.
Okay, I think Ms. Duval, Rich Duval, we can hear you.
I don't know, can you hear me?
Yep, and we can see you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. I'm sorry. Anyway, I didn't know if you would get to me to read my letter, and I'm very much appreciative of that. I just wanted to let you know how much supportive we are of the development. My family, as I told you in the letter, you know, my mom and dad were very supportive of a very special purpose for this particular piece of property. My brothers and I very much support this development. It really meets so many needs of the community, and it meets what we really envisioned for the property. And I really do hope that you will look at this proposal and, you know, I understand the needs of the community, and it really is just a wonderful opportunity for everybody. And thank you so much. And I truly respect your opinions, and I would welcome the opportunity to meet with any of you and to talk about this proposal, and also what our family wanted for this property from the inception back to the 1950s and to today. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, I think that we'll wrap this up as the hour is getting late, and we have a couple of other applicants' projects to discuss. So I do before, and Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, we need to continue this hearing.
Yes, sir.
To the next date for our next meeting, and I think that we decided we are not meeting in August again, and our next meeting is September 7th. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so I'd entertain a motion before we do that, the motion was made to schedule a site walk to take a look at the property, and I think we should do that. So I don't know if we can do that now within the context of the hearing, or whether we can close the hearing and then make that decision. I bet we can close the hearing and make the decision, but what do you think, Patrick?
You should keep the hearing open.
Okay, that's right, because it is a public site walk.
Yeah.
All right. So this go back to August. We would do this in the daytime. So I'm available any Tuesday in August to do a site walk.
I have
Almost any day. Any Tuesdays work good.
I'll be serving jury duty on the 17th, which I believe is a Tuesday.
You take off your mask,
I told you I mumbled too much. I'm serving jury duty on the 17th, which I believe is a Tuesday of August.
okay.
I could do August 31st. I'm a little bit tied up on other days.
Okay, how about the 31st? Does that work for people?
It's fine with me.
Fine.
Sure.
All right, so we will schedule a site walk on August 31st. That is open to the public. We need to pick a time that works best, certainly for the applicant and the Duvall family, Rich Duvall family. But the 31st is a Tuesday. What works best for people? Because I know some people are working.
I just have a couple comments about it. Number one, I would avoid early morning or evening because of the insects. Yes. So I would urge more middle of the day if it works for folks, and I would also urge that people come prepared with sensible walking shoes because it's extremely steep and ledgy and difficult walking if you actually want to get the contours of the site.
Okay.
And bug repellent might still be in order if the deer flies are still active.
So people want to schedule, could we do noon or like 1 o'clock in the afternoon? Would that work? Somebody pick a time.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. is fine.
All right, so 1 p.m., August 31st, we'll schedule a site walk, and the public is invited. They can attend. Just so you know, the planning board will not be making any decisions. We are prevented by open meeting law from discussing this we can discuss the project, but we cannot discuss the details, nor we can make any policy or any decisions. So go ahead, Patrick Raffett.
I think that it's important to note also, this is still a private property. The owner and the developer's attorney may not want public involvement on the site.
Okay.
So that is entirely at their election.
Okay. So what we'll do is, once we've determined the extent, certainly the planning board as the adjudicatory body can and would like access, and I can't imagine that the applicant would not want that to happen. We can post the details on the town website in terms of whether the public is, whether the applicant would like the public to walk the site. But it is important for all of us to be walking the site and get a sense of the lay of the land, truly. And Pat Norton, you have something to say.
Sorry, just quickly, I'm not sure the extent of which it's been surveyed either, but these site walks are always beneficial if they're, I'll take off my mask.
Thank you.
If the site walks are always more beneficial if the site has been staked and surveyed to show the extent of the development with flags and things of that nature.
Very good comment. So to Jill and Larry, it would be very helpful prior to the site walk is to stake the delineation of the actual project, I think it's 16 acres that are proposed for development. So we know the extent and location.
Yeah, I drove by there yesterday. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I did just receive an email from Attorney Mann telling me that Ms. Rich would not allow the public to attend the site walk on the property.
Okay, well, I'm glad Joe was so responsive to that request. So this will be a planning board meeting only, site walk on the 31st at 1 p.m. And having done that, I'd like to entertain a motion to continue the hearing on the special permit for 133 Essex Street to September 7th at 7 p.m. And I assume we will be still in a Zoom mode at that point, although I look forward to the day we're not.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Okay, any discussion? None. All right, we'll do a roll call vote, starting from, no, Pat can't vote because he's an alternate. Richard Boroff?
Aye.
Marnie Crouch, aye.
Rick Mitchell, aye.
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Corey Beaulieu, aye.
Jonathan Poor, aye.
All right, thank you. That concludes the hearing on 133 Essex. Thank you for everybody who attended and asked questions. Now we'll move on to conceptual review and discussion of a 40B proposal from Harbor Light Community Partners at 421 Asbury Street. Okay. Yes, please go to the microphone because that's the only way people will hear and see you.
Excuse me, I've got to run out for just a minute.
Okay. What we might do, if people agree to, we might take a 2-minute break in case people need to take a break, get some water, use the facilities, take off their mask and stick their head in the window, run outside.
Andrew, I have the electronic files on here. If we share them, if you need to refer to them, it's easier for the folks on the Zoom to see it. Yeah, I think it's great. So you just let me know. You just tell me where to go.
Yeah, we'll just go through them, so if you
Okay.
want to pop it up, then tell me.
You want to open that window? It's stressful watching everybody.
Yeah, no. You probably got the worst chair in the room, too.
Or is this a better one? I don't know, it's not so bad.
Good.
Stuffy.
Tricky glass.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Historic.
You have to come up with a Pat 1, Pat 2. Every time somebody says Patrick, I
I
always
know.
start talking.
Just to help everybody out, you have
Everybody's got a map.
17 copies of Andrew's latest package.
There's one more applicant, and then there's some discussion afterwards, or I'm not sure.
I'm in no rush. I was just wondering about timing.
Yeah.
At least another hour.
Probably another hour.
All right, that's fine.
Yeah.
We're doing one of our marathon sessions.
We've been pretty lucky so far. This is our first long one in a while.
Yeah. Having fun, Bill?
What?
Having fun?
Roasting.
Well, pop open that window.
Good job, Neil. Make it happen, buddy.
Haven't seen you here in many, many years.
I think I probably still have the most mileage though.
I'll bet you do. And you're missing your hat.
I have it.
Oh, excuse me, it's a different hat.
Okay, gentlemen, if we could come back and sit down, or get your water and come back and sit down.
Thanks for doing that, Patrick. Appreciate it. This is the latest. Yep. You open this.
Okay, the chair recognizes Andrew DeFranza. My brain is already fried. Andrew DeFranza, Harbor Light, discuss your proposal on Asbury Street. So as background, since Patrick is not here, this is a voluntary presentation by Andrew discussing the proposed 45-unit family housing project is at 421 Asbury, I believe. And the board has had, I think, 3 passes at this?
I think that's right.
I think 3 passes at this, and each time you've taken our comments to heart and presented a new versions of the drawing, so I understand you're here to present another version of the drawing, so why don't you proceed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the latest turn of the set, as it were. Is this okay for hearing? I assume keep this on?
Yep, you can take it off if you wish, or leave it on, but just make sure you're speaking clearly and into the microphone directly.
Okay, I think I'll take it off if that's okay per protocol.
Yeah.
And if that's a problem for anybody, I'm happy to put it back on.
Yeah. So I think we're
very good. So we have a number of sheets here for you, mostly responding to questions that the board asked about last time. I think maybe there's one item that we're holding, but other than that, I believe we were able to touch on everything. So I'm going to just touch on that list quickly while you have this summary sheet up. There are a number of later sheets that show you various elevations, different views, so that you would be able to get a better sense of what things look like, including distance between houses and buildings, as well as some lighting. But for the purpose of the summary, I think we'll stick with this sheet for the moment and go from there. So one of the questions that was asked, actually I think this was yours, Patrick, was about the topography and the elevation at the front of the building, as well as a secondary but related question was around green space at the front and added green space. So would like to point out that we confirm that the topography at the front of the building, that is sloped downward toward the parking area. People were concerned about there being a depression there and the possibility that there will be runoff. I think this was you, right? Runoff toward the building, and it is sloped the opposite direction. There has to be some work on the civil side, some various fill and cut, but that is the engineering of that per the civil engineer. We did remove and change some of the parking arrangements per some of the last conversation and add some patio areas out front. As you'll see right in the direct front door of the building, there's a fairly wide area with a patio to the left and to the right of the doorway, and then handicap spaces directly to the front. There's also a number of other green spaces and islands, both on the roadway up toward the building, the driveway, and throughout the parking lot. Additionally, to the green space question, I think you'll notice to the left side of the site plan, you'll see a number of little boxes, which are the raised bed garden areas adjacent to what had already been the playground that we're proposing. Furthermore, there was some question about access on the site and people's ability to move around on the site. So you will notice there is a winding line all the way around the edge of the site, thank you, which is essentially a walking path, which I believe measures in its extent a quarter mile. So this was added for the purpose of making sure that people had access all around the site to walk and get exercise and efficiently make use of the outdoor green space. One of the big questions was about the road. This has been an ongoing question. So we did move the driveway once more to the far left of the site, tried to locate it between the widest point between two houses, which I think was successful. My guess is that this is, I think, the third move of the driveway. And so there are so many places to go. We continue not to like the corner. A number of people have asked about the gravel road, which we do not control the use of, on the right-hand corner, and about that area. And we continue from what we expect to be a safety standpoint, an engineering standpoint, and a screening standpoint, do not prefer that corner. We have not engaged the traffic engineer yet, who will give a lot of technical feedback, both about the trips that are coming in and out, the parking count, the sight lines, et cetera. But we expect when we have that person engaged that they would have similar feedback. I also understand there may have been an accident around this corner. Somebody jumped the roadway and ended up in one of the Canterbrook yards recently, is what I had heard. So that corner strikes me as not being the place we want to be. So we did go to the far left, as I said, and in between the houses. Later on, as we go through some of the plans, I think you'll notice, I think this was your point, Mr. Poor, question, added quite a bit of roofline detail to the rear and the front and the sides. So as we scroll through, you'll be able to see that. We did also add a lighting plan, which we can look at a little later to show you a delineation where the lighting would be, as well as essentially the candle strength, the brightness, and a line that will show you where the darkness would start and where the light is. Thankfully, the vast majority of the lighting produced by the site, which is dark sky compliant, is retained within the red line, which is the property line. And then I think finally, and this is a question that probably will need a little more work, on the far right, we continue to expect in a variety of places, but a full landscape plan with the addition of a number of evergreen trees on the far right in the buffer between Canterbrook and the building. You'll note there the widths of the dimensions remain the same. It's about 90 feet to the property line and not quite 150 feet to the nearest house. We have not met with the department heads yet. I believe this was also your question, Mr. Poor, was around the edge of the building and the fire lane and the width of that site related to the growth of the trees. So we don't know yet what the fire department is going to expect. We did go back to the civil engineer, and they confirmed that we needed 20 feet, which is what we have. If there's a difference in that, we're happy to work with the landscape designer to make this thicker or different, meaning the tree line thicker or different, and the roadway more narrow. It may be that there's a possibility that it would not all need to be paved, and that might help us as well with the landscaping. But when we have a landscaping designer involved, we're happy to get more into that, but we don't have more detail on that now. So I believe that's the summary, though I may have missed a point that was raised in the last meeting. I think that was most of them. And I'm happy to go through the rest of the slides if people want to feedback on that. I know you have that in front of you in hard copy. I also have a full set, full-size set if people wanted to see that. But in the event that you had questions about any technical item before we went through the drawings, I'm happy to field those now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good. We'll open it up to board questions. Pat Norton, if you have any questions, why don't we start with you?
No, sorry, no questions for me.
Okay. Patrick Reffett, do you have any comments? None. Okay. Richard Boroff?
I've forgotten, exactly where is this on Asbury Street?
So this is just past Canterbrook.
Okay.
So if you're driving, Richard, and you're going on Asbury, you pass Canterbrook. There's a gravel lane that looks like a kind of a fire road, and it's just past that.
And is this gravel lane to the right or to the left of?
To the right.
It's to the right of our site and the left of Canterbrook, if you were
by-
looking
it's,
directly at it.
Right here, is it?
Yes, right there where Patrick is.
That's the gravel road?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
And this is about a 4-acre-ish piece.
Okay, thanks.
You done?
Yeah, thank you.
Marnie?
Oh, well, I commend your efforts here. I think that this iteration is far superior to the one that you initially presented the board with. I don't have any specific questions about these materials, but I have to reiterate a point that I made at an earlier meeting. I think it's inevitable that the town is going to have to provide sidewalks in that area. We have the Habitat for Humanity project going in there.
Right.
The population of school-aged children, I don't know what it would be, but I would estimate it would be at least 50, maybe more. And it's inevitable that they will be walking along that section of Highland Street.
Right.
And as you said, there was an accident. And it is an area of Asbury where people tend to drive over the speed limit, and the shoulder of the road is very narrow. And I think as a practical matter, we shouldn't wait until someone is injured before we recognize the inevitable. And I think that sidewalks have to be considered one way or another. And how we go about addressing that is something that the board should discuss.
Is it okay if I respond to that, Mr. Chairman, or?
Yes, please.
So I think it's a really great point, Marnie. So our current thought process on that, though we're open to it, is that you'll notice the waving line toward Asbury Street is part of the walkway, which we have on the property side of the stone wall. So to your point about the traffic, we preferred the idea that there would be a walkway inside the wall as opposed to outside the wall, which is why we went with a walkway on that side as opposed to a sidewalk on the street. But to your point, they're going to have to walk somewhere.
Well, the kids will, the older kids will walk into town, and, you know, it's just what kids do. They're going to ride their bikes, and they're going to walk into town.
Right.
Especially the older kids. They're not going to be supervised 24/7, and, you know, 10, 12, 17, whatever, they're going to walk into town. And,
right.
And I think that just the population of that section of Asbury will mushroom, and other parts of town that probably don't have anywhere near this density do have sidewalks. So
Right. Yeah, so we're open to it, but that was the logic at that time.
Right. I understand. And actually having this pathway around the perimeter of the building, I think, is a wonderful idea. I mean, if it's a quarter mile, I mean, you just have to walk around there 4 times, and you have some good exercise.
That's right. I would need some oxygen, but yes. Thank you.
Emil.
First of all, I want to commend you for listening to what members had to say at the last meeting and really trying to address these in a serious way. So
Sure. Thank you.
appreciate that. And especially since the choice is made to put a building of this type to house everybody within one building, and the location you chose really raised a lot of difficult issues for you.
Yes.
As a developer. And I think you've gone a long way to try to mitigate some of the aspects of consolidation on a small area on that site, as opposed to spreading out. So for us, it's up, you know, is this final version of this, you know, what, but I think, again, a lot of the issues that I have left are relatively small. I'll just mention a few.
Sure.
The parking, you know, the wall-to-wall parking dimension for 90-degree parking should be a little bit wider. You're 60 feet from side to side, should be more like 62 to 64, just to give a little more room for coming and going through the parking area. The only thing, and you made some nice changes to the entrance parking area. Just, again, be sure the turning radii, when you, that last, I assume these are painted stripes on the ground that
Right.
you have, I mean, on that, where you have a flower bed, for example, the car turning around in that corner, just be sure you got a good turning radius there. Trash and storage and removal, or trash storage and removal, do you have a location on the site for that?
We don't. We are strongly assuming that the Canterbrook folks will prefer it on the far side of the building. So I think that's the expectation, that, you know, there would be trash rooms inside the building and then an exit to a dumpster facility. We have used compactors in some cases where it's rolled out from the interior of the building on a periodic day. But in both cases, I expect that it will go essentially to the left or north.
Yeah. And lastly, the site lighting. Could you possibly submit the fixture cuts on the proposed lighting luminaires? I noticed you had some data on the lighting page, on the photometric page. But so we could get a look at what the light looks like, and the cutoff provisions that are on the lighting fixture itself. That would be useful. Pole heights, do you know what those are?
Yeah, I don't off the top of my head. Low, I think, is what I would say. So
yeah, they recommend 14 feet, kind of, for 12 to 14 for, you know, this type in a residential area. So hopefully it's not.
This is not a stadium type.
Not a stadium. So that would be helpful from a lighting standpoint.
Yep.
So
yeah, well, hopefully we can get that for you on the cuts, so you'll be able to see the heights.
That's it. Thank you.
And I'm just going to interject on the lighting as well. Is it possible to add deflectors on the Canterbrook side on the outside lighting?
It probably is. You mean hoods, like a?
Well, you could have a 3-sided deflector, so the light, the cutoff is not visible because they're down below.
Right.
So they're likely to see more of that light. So if you could cut that off, that would probably help lessen the glare from that.
Yeah, we would be willing to do that, and you'll see it on the lighting plan that it's dark within the property line in their direction.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
we could add something like that.
Bill?
I have no specific comments. Obviously, it's evolved a lot in the last 6 months, and I commend you on that.
Thank you.
Corey?
Yeah, same. I mean, echoing from what Marnie first said, it looks much, much better, much, much more considered than the very first delivery of it. The parking count is down and accurate.
I thought you might say that.
I like the path around. I think it addresses a lot of what people have been discussing with like children at play, which, you know, it's considerate, it's behind the line, it's everything that we could be expecting you to do. I think the landscaping does a lot for me, and I don't know. I think you've listened and done well.
Thank you.
So, as others have, I thank you for your responsiveness.
Sure.
Seems like you've listened carefully. So, I just have a couple minor comments and questions. I think Patrick Ruffett shared a letter from an abutter at Canterbrook regarding the walkway near their units, and there might be maybe a creative way to have both the separation between the properties and maintain the walkway, and maybe that could potentially be maybe even weaving a fence through the tree line, so that the Canterbrook folks aren't looking at a big blank barrier. It's sort of softened by the trees, but it also allows your walkway to be sort of naturalized. So that might be a thoughtful way to address that. The other thing is I have a question about and I know you don't have a landscape plan, but just in terms of basic intention along the Asbury Street side, are you indicating the quantity of evergreens for screening, or is that just an indication that there are evergreens there?
I think the latter. I mean, eventually, of course, there'll be a scope list about specific location and type and volume, but I don't know that yet.
Okay, because as I've mentioned before, those are deciduous trees, and in the winter that will be fairly barren through there. So
right.
A fairly decent volume staggered so that it's soft, a soft line would be beneficial.
Great.
And then in addition to that, I think there's an opportunity. I commend you for your driveway. I know that you went through a lot of iterations, but I think you landed on something that was, I think responsive to all the comments. And one refinement for that might be to, again, think about your planting, obviously honoring the need for site safety and sight lines, traffic safety, but there's an opportunity, the way you've got your driveway laid out, to kind of screen the building from people driving by, and also from number 470 from looking right in there.
Right.
And that's just by careful placement of your shrubs to sort of neck down the driveway, but still maintain your site safety distances.
Agreed.
And then the last thing is, I support Marnie's comment about the sidewalks. And I think you again have an opportunity here to marry a couple of interests, and you've almost got it here in the sense that the way you've laid out your paths sort of invites you off the street as a passing pedestrian onto that walkway, but not quite. Just a little refinement in your alignments so that it's clear that you're not trespassing when you walk on that walkway.
Right.
And it's just subtle refinements in the entry and exit of that walkway. But I think it's a great strategy.
Thank you. I appreciate that, John. And I to echo Marnie's points on I think we hadn't mentioned this before, but I think one of the points with that walkway or sidewalk, depending on where it was, is if it is where it is, the intent would be that would be public use. So I think that's...
So a specific example of how you might do that is with the entry and exit point at the left and right side of the property, just make that a little bit more of a flow, like you're leaving the street and it's just a segue from the street instead of entering the property. So it's how that first alignment links up,
right?
On the left, and on the right, maybe aiming that exit point a little more out to the intersection there, just so it invites the passing pedestrian onto it.
Maybe some signage as well. Just
just something so it's clear you're not trespassing. That's all.
Right. Thank you.
And if a couple of questions. Last time we talked about the fire lane. Was it 24 feet last time?
The last I heard from the civil was that it was 20.
Okay.
So, but we, like I said, we have not talked to the department heads yet about their various preferences.
Okay.
So we will do that, and that'll drive some of the discussion about material, width, turning radius.
Right.
And the
So
like.
to the extent, if that can be, even if it's dropped by a foot or two, all to the better.
Mhm.
And I echo the comment about the path on the right-hand or east side of the property, if that can be moved over and woven through the plantings, all to the better. Because and I agree with the Jonathan's on the public access points moving to the street
Right.
level. I think that's it for me.
Okay. I'm happy to scroll through them. Patrick did, such a good job of getting it up there, so I thought you might want to roll through. You're welcome to do that, or
I think all of us have.
you've been here a while, so.
We've got it in our laps. We don't need to see it again.
Okay.
Unless any specific member wants.
Can I just ask one more question? Site signage or identifier, are you planning to have a sign of some sort out at the street or wherever to
Yeah.
identify the building and the?
Yeah, the likelihood of, at the driveway that there would be a sign there directing traffic in and notifying or identifying what the project is would be very high.
Yeah, I mean, if you can make that part of the submittal, that'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah, I am certain that we would, and that
Thank you.
the ZBA will have access to that.
So,
Mr. Chair, can I interrupt a second?
absolutely.
I know that one of the abutters from Canterbrook, Ellen Rothman, had sent me an email that I'd circulated some, and I had sent it to you. I wanted to make sure you had a chance to respond to her points, if you have those.
I don't have the email in front of me, but I did respond to her via email. She did have the question about the path up to the right. That was the pronounced one that I
I
recall.
think she just raised her hand.
Oh, well, that would be even better. There she is.
I mean, Ellen did, not whether it's the Ellen or
Yeah,
not.
try Ellen.
That's right.
Yeah, she unmuted.
Are we connected?
Sorry, I didn't hear you if you spoke.
Okay,
To me.
you are on.
Thank you.
And if you could identify your name and address, please.
Sure. I'm Ellen Rothman. I live at 6 Canterbrook. And I'm speaking tonight for myself and my boyfriend as opposed to the community as a whole. I really appreciate what both the board and Andrew have done to try to address some of our issues. So I thank you for that. I want to just go back, if you'll bear with me. We lived in Newton, and next door were some kids who played basketball, and wherever we went, there was congestion, and it was traffic, and and people and things like that. And we felt in our senior years we wanted to do something that was quiet, that was peaceful, that had character, that was really for us in our senior years, and especially as we travel less, we stay at home. We want to be able to look out and really enjoy what we're looking at. I'm in Unit 6, which is at the corner where when I look out of my sunroom right now, I see beautiful green trees and I see a field. With this project, there's no way around it that, we as 23 units are now going to have 45 units next to us. Our 23 units are 1 to 2 people. The 45 units are probably going to be more 2 to 3 to 4 people. So I'm thinking 200 people easily in a space that's smaller where our 23 units are. I'm not opposed in any way to the people who live there. My question is there any way for both Andrew and us to win is there any way that on Mr. Britton's other property that'd be fuller north to us, anything that would put a little more distance between us and the project in the development? Because for us, I personally support what Andrew's doing, but the size, the scope, how large it is, the impact it's going to do on a group of senior citizens who find it important to feel safe, to find it important to have control over what they're doing. Those are the concerns that I personally have. And I think that y'all have addressed a lot of those. And again, I really appreciate that. But if there's any way to put more distance so that there are people who literally their living room, sunroom is specifically on the road, that little fire road, and anything they look at is going to be looking right in their home, even with vegetation. And the lights right now at night, we look out and it's dark. Now it's going to be lit up. It's a huge difference for us and why we chose Hamilton as our new home. And we love it here and we don't want to leave. So if there's any way around that, be very much appreciated. Thank you for your time.
Okay, very good. Andrew, any comment on that?
Yeah, no, it's great feedback, and Ellen's been really good about messaging as well and asking questions, as a number of other neighbors have. So I do think we can continue to work well on the lighting question to mitigate and try to promote as much darkness in their ongoing sightline as possible, and through the tree line screening, which I think will be significant, and people will find a high level of quality there. The question about moving the building, I think there are two issues, but one major one, which is my understanding is Mr. Britton, the balance of the land he has on this site is controlled through a conservation restriction. So this 4-acre piece was the only piece that was unrestricted. So to my knowledge, there's not more land to buy or move in either direction, that this is the only land that was both available and unrestricted. I'm not 100% certain that that's the case, but that is my understanding at the moment.
And might I say that Andrew and I have talked about this, that my thing would be, I don't know the laws and the requirements, but if an area, 4 acres could be swapped further down the road so that the amount of farmland would stay the same, but the building itself wouldn't be something that we all literally will be looking at.
No,
Thanks.
that's a question we've had, and I know I brought that up as well. That's really a discussion that needs to happen with Peter Britton. Andrew is working with a piece of land that he's been given access to, and that was something that Peter Britton decided. So that's a question that only Peter Britton can answer.
Is it something that the ZBA or the planning board would approve? Should Mr. Britton be willing to approve it?
That's a discussion you'd have to have with Peter Britton. That's outside our purview. And so Andrew came to us on a voluntary basis to go through this process, and we've offered him our opinions, and he's responded. But again, at the end of the day, he's dealing with a site that Peter Britton made available for this, and it's entirely up to Peter Britton to decide if he wants to make any modifications to that.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay. Any other questions?
Kathleen.
We have Kathleen. Hold on, Kathleen, while we connect. Are we connected, Pat?
Should be, yep.
Okay, Kathleen, we are connected. We don't see you, but hopefully you can hear us. Evidently not.
I'll leave her up there and go to Leonard.
And
Hello, can you hear me?
yes, Leonard, we see you are in the Grand Canyon.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm actually right across the street from the proposed project. That's where I really am. Leonard Rubin, 462 Asbury Street, a butter to this project. Just want to make several comments. First about the auto accident that happened about a month ago, where yes, someone drove through the fence and into the back of one of the Kennerbrook buildings. I still don't know what was the cause of that accident, but it is a statistical fallacy to say that because that accident happened. I've been here almost 17 years, and that's the first time that anything like that's ever happened. So it's a rare event. And the fact that it happened at that location is you really can't draw any conclusion that that location is a more dangerous place to put a driveway than further down the road, whereas I actually think that corner is the best place to put the access, the driveway access, if next to the gravel road. I understand that it cannot be on the gravel road, but in that corner. My second comment is about conservation easements. They absolutely can be swapped. We voted to do so at the town meeting this spring. I understand that Peter Britton would have to agree to it. They can be swapped, and he should be considerate of the abutters. My next comment is, I think the lighting is good. I would just add, if there's going to be reflectors to keep the light away from the Kennerbrook houses, there should also be reflectors, at least on the outside of the property closest to Asbury Street, to keep the light from traveling across Asbury Street to the houses across. And my next comment is about the rather large parking area that is directly adjacent to the stone fence in Asbury Street. That's basically I'll be looking at a parking lot, which, as Ellen pointed out, I have a beautiful view of a field now and a green field with trees, and it's going to become a parking lot. And also, while there have been talk about reducing light, I want to point out about sound. So that the aforementioned parking lot is going to be barely 100 feet from my open window. You might have heard a car go by right now on Asbury Street. And, people come and go at all hours of the day and night, or at least until, say, midnight. And car doors make a lot of noise when they slam. And I want to know if there's anything that can be done in the form of vegetation or other soundproofing to prevent that sound from just propagating down Asbury Street. Because with 45 units, that's a lot of car doors being closed at all hours of the day, perhaps between 1 and 5 a.m. if we're lucky. So those are all my additional comments here. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anybody else that would like to comment online, please let us know.
Good. I would, but I don't know if we can do it.
All right. Who? Kathleen? We had you. There you are. Are you on mute? Or are we on mute? Hold on one second.
No. They muted us just now.
There we go. We can hear you now.
Oh, you can? Okay. Thank you for your patience.
If you could identify yourself, name and address, please.
Sure. Stephen and Kathleen Injemy, 14 Canterbrook Lane.
What was your last name, please?
Injemy?
Okay, go ahead.
Stephen? Yeah. Okay.
Hi. So a couple questions. Similar to Len's question about noise, I think there was a question in the previous meeting about mechanicals, location of mechanicals. I'm not sure. I haven't gone exhaustively over these plans, but I'm curious where those are located and the decibel level that we can expect from those units. And then separately, similar to what was brought up in the previous meeting about Chabaco, we've got a septic system maybe design that, and some farmers kind of curious about the proximity of those two to each other, as is actively farming going on over there right now. And the septic looks like it might be located in that vicinity. Just curious about what the impact of that might be. So those two concerns for now.
Okay, Andrew, would you like to address those?
Sure. It's good questions, and nice to meet you. I don't think we've met before yet. You want me to respond to Mr. Rubin's question about the soundproofing, or?
Yeah, he wants to know the location of mechanicals and the likely decibel impact.
Yep. So this is very likely to be a series of mini splits. For folks who are familiar with that, sort of an in-unit mini split. That decision hasn't been made yet, but that's exceedingly likely as opposed to central mechanical system. But we don't, so there is no mechanical plan yet, but we can, when that's been decided, we can get the mechanical plan with the decibel level that people would know where it is, what the sound is, how far it's likely to travel. If it is mini splits, if that's where we land on that, it would be exceedingly quiet relative to a big system, which probably is what people are thinking about. And the second question about the septic system, we have it right now up in that left corner, which I think is probably what's being referred to. It has not been designed yet. We tend to like the Waterloo biofilter system, which is a higher end processing system. It's the one we use at Firehouse Place. It's also the one we designed and got approved in Wenham. And so we likely would use that. That process will go through the Board of Health. And so we'll have to get that approved under Title V, and we'll be able to give folks at that point all of the distances between everything, including the drainage system, the septic system's proximity to anything else, any redundancies where the primary and secondary area would be, and anything else anybody would like to know, but that's not been designed yet.
Okay. Yeah, for anybody that is interested, Canterbrook uses a BioPure system, and as I understand from the testimony several years ago, is the byproduct is almost drinkable.
Right. Right. But we'll be happy to provide all the information on the decibels and mechanicals and the septic to the public when those things are designed and proposed.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Q&A. I don't know if these are carryovers.
Oh.
Yeah. Can you still hear us?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, thanks. Sorry. Just an additional question about the trees, the evergreen trees that were spoken about, and we can see them on the plan. Is there any way to have those be fully mature? I know they do that a lot on golf courses when they have to replace trees after a major storm. They can actually put in full-grown or mature trees. I don't really know. They seem to do that here.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Yep.
I mean, Andrew.
We don't need another one. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a great question. They will certainly not be new trees in terms of fully mature. I'm not sure that I'd want to say what level of maturity, but we'd want to get them to be large enough to have significant impact at planting. What we'll end up doing, and we're happy to talk with and work with any neighbors in this process, is when the landscaped architect is involved and we're delineating the scope, both the location of trees, volume of trees at the front, Asbury, which I think is going to address some of Mr. Rubin's questions about sound, as well as on the Canterbrook site. We're happy to work with any of the neighbors about how that's going to go, heights, fullness, distances between them, types, locations, specific sight lines, anything that people are, if they have appetite for that. That hasn't been designed yet, but we're happy to make them as significant as we can, with an eye on wanting them long-term to be cohesive, meaning we don't want to plant things that are going to grow into each other in advance.
Okay, very good. And these are questions. Can you please enlarge the presentation? How many people?
Doesn't look like any of these are questions to address, just,
Say again, Pat?
doesn't look like these are questions for the board to address, just comments on the presentation
Oh, okay.
displayed.
Yeah. Might I make an added comment?
I guess you are. Go ahead.
Thank you. I had two comments to what Andrew was speaking about and also what Len had said, that if we were able to move the development further north, not far from where they are now, there's actually a path that goes along Asbury that's on Mr. Britton's property, and that connects to Vineyard Hill, and it also connects to the Greenbelt, which also then connects to Bradley Palmer, so that if this were further north and you looked for open spaces and places and for organized activities and things like that, doing that might be very helpful. The other thing I just wanted to comment on the location of the entrance, which Andrew and I had spoken about, is that you have also, in addition to the units, the 45 units, you also have the 10 units going in from Habitat across the street, and you have 23 units with 1 to 2 people here. So that's a lot of traffic converging on one little, 0.2 of a mile stretch of Asbury. So thank you.
Okay, very good. And now I'm going to make an observation here, and then I think we'll close out the questions because we're getting really late here.
I have one more question, if you don't mind.
Sure, if you'd let me finish my comment. This is a good opportunity for the neighbors at Canterbrook and across the street to become involved, not beyond where you are now in terms of safety, sidewalks, and other issues, because it's people like you that get involved in the public process that can actually influence the outcome. So I would suggest staying involved and exploring any and all options that you've discussed tonight. Thank you. And then what was your question?
Yeah, I have one question actually for the planning board, and that's, we're going through these discussions of trees and lighting mitigation, but you can't visualize it until it's built. So my question is, when it's built, if there are opportunities for, obviously you can't move the building at that point, but let's say there are opportunities for minor changes to vegetation or blocking lamps to improve the light proofing and soundproofing. Do the abutters have any recourse to make sure those get done, or are we just going to be told, we don't have to do that because it's our project on our property and sorry?
Andrew,
in other words, if things don't go as planned when the building goes up, do we have any recourse to to force minor changes like that?
Andrew, do you want to address that?
Sure. Yeah, I think I have a sense of your question, Mr. Rubin. I think what I would say is our track record, and if you wanted to talk to neighbors at other buildings, is such that we're very happy to voluntarily be good neighbors. I think it's unlikely that you'd be able to compel, which I think is your technical question, but it is 100% likely that we would do something to make sure that our neighbors were treated well if there was a concern they had after construction about a specific issue around lighting or trees or fencing. And that, I think that's probably the best I could do on that front. So character and track record over documentation.
All right, very good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Unless the board has any other questions, I'd like to wrap this up and move on to our last item. Okay, hearing none, then I'd say thank you very much for coming in. And my last question is, what's your next step?
So that's actually a very good question. So we're working regularly on design. We have not gotten the project eligibility letter approval from the state yet, which is the key item. That's been in for a few months now. So whenever that comes in, then we'll submit to the ZBA. I think before that, though, we're likely to try to meet with the department heads and start design work on septic and drainage. so that we're as ready as we can be when the zoning board process does start. So a little more design, a little more discussion, project eligibility letters received, and then we'll file, which I assume will be, probably not before October 1st.
Okay, so your next step, you would be following preparation and eligibility letter, et cetera, is to the ZBA with a formal application.
Correct.
And at that point, then the ZBA takes over the public hearing process.
Correct.
And it will proceed through that review and regulatory process.
Yeah, and in that process will be, to a number of your questions, full plans for a variety of elements, including the ability to Mr. Rubin's point, to bind us through the permit on a variety of conditions about performance and what things are going to look like and function like. So some of the dialogue here will turn into documentation.
Right. So for those in the audiences, it's very much in your interest to stay involved and participate in the ZBA hearings, because that's where the rubber meets the road and the details get nailed down and the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. So I urge your continued participation. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for all your work and responsiveness to our comments.
Thank you to the board, and it's nice to see you all. Good night.
Okay. And our last item on the agenda is a request by Rebecca Campbell as a personal representative of the estate of John L. Gardner, requesting permitting to removal a 20-foot section of the stone wall along Bridge Street in order to allow a new driveway access at 375 Bridge Street. It's not necessary to remove any trees. The new driveway will resemble the existing driveway in width and material. And there's a...
Is this because Bridge Street's a scenic way?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay.
It's a what, a scenic way,
A
yes.
scenic way.
Yeah, the posting was read a while ago. As the chairman read, this is a simple request to remove 20 feet of existing stone wall to allow for a new driveway to take place at 375 Bridge Street. I am told by the applicant requester that what they would do is simply use the stone that's there right now to create the curvature for the driveway, so those stones would remain. Pretty simple request. I would recommend the board accept it.
Is this for an A&R?
No.
Oh, really?
They just want a new driveway into their property, so I'm told.
Because there's a sign up there that says for sale.
Oh.
And it's not the main house. So I drive down that road, dozens of times, and there's a brokerage sign on this piece of land.
Yeah.
Beyond, as you're going east, beyond the driveway into the Gardners, you come upon this piece of land, and there's a brokerage sign there. And I always assumed they were going to sell off an acre or two.
Yeah, there has been no discussion relative to an A&R lot or creating any other lots as part of
There's
the
forest
request.
behind there, so if you're trying to get to the house through this piece of stone wall, you're going to have to cut through 40 or 50 feet of forest across the field to actually make it an entrance into the rest of the property. So there's nothing saying it is what it is, but I suspect it's the first step in an A&R.
Yeah, that's entirely possible, but like I say, that it didn't accompany anything with Rebecca Campbell's request.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the request to remove a 20-foot section from the property at 375 Bridge Street. Don't all speak at once.
What's the rule on historic stone walls?
There really isn't a rule.
There's some state
There
statute.
is a state law that
Right.
enables it, and it allows the local planning board to have purview relative to scenic roadways and in particular, trees that are in the right-of-way, public right-of-way, and the stone walls themselves. So the practice in Hamilton heretofore has largely been when there are stone walls that need to be relocated, moved. If the property owner is not going to use the stone, DPW typically requests to have that stone so they can relocate it at another location that they might need it.
Okay.
Can I just ask? I am seeing this for the first time, and I don't exactly know where it is, but a question would be, is there any value instead of just literally lopping the stone wall off with no termination at either side, asking that there be some sort of a termination strategy, a turning in of the stone or a pier or something that it looks more intentional than just a chop through the stone wall?
Yeah, as I had mentioned, what they had intended on doing at the curvature of the drive as it enters, to use the stone to create those returns.
That answers my question.
Pass these down. These are pictures of the place. Going out there today, yesterday, I don't remember. But you can pass these around.
It's not much different than what we're looking at.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's exactly what we're looking at. So,
Is that the pictures I sent you? What? Oh, okay.
so we could,
I sent you.
so we could actually, we could include that as a condition of approval, that the stone that is removed is being used for entrance curvature. Would that satisfy your concern?
I think that would be a more sensitive way to do this.
Would you care to
I
make
would-
that motion?
Yeah, I'd make a motion that the approval be stipulated on reusing all of the existing stone to make a curve into the driveway that responds to the needed turning radius into the driveway.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Richard?
Aye.
Arnie?
Marnie Crouch, aye. Subject to that condition, because I think just to willy-nilly permit the removal of the stone walls pretty much has the effect of obviating the scenic road and really the beauty of these stone walls, which once gone are really
that right
expensive to replace.
That's-
Okay, Emil?
these-
Emil
these
Dahlquist, aye,
people-
with the recommendation.
That was the motion, so we don't need to add an addendum to that.
His land goes all the way
Bill?
back here.
Mr. Wheaton,
I'll approve it.
say again?
I'll approve it. We have the property up here on Google Earth.
Is that a yes?
That's a yes.
Okay. Corey?
There's the field.
I'll approve with the stipulation Jonathan made.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. And,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
okay. And Rick Mitchell, aye. Unless there's some really pressing business, I'd like to adjourn.
Minutes?
I moved.
Oh,
the
minutes,
planning
that's
board.
right, that's right.
Greenhouse
Sorry.
is
Thank you,
huge.
Marnie, for bringing that up. Appreciate it.
They can't cut through like that.
All
They're
right.
Trying to cut through like that.
And all this paperwork, I've got to dig and find my agenda. There we go. Okay. So approval of the minutes of
July 13th.
July 13th, second edition, as amended. I assume that You've reviewed these?
I have. That's, Marcy Ricker forwarded them to Patrick and me, and apparently Ann has had some personal issues, so Marcy
Has stepped in.
has stepped in.
And
So I have reviewed these minutes and edited them, and if everyone is happy with them, or,
Okay.
I don't know if anybody, if everyone has had the opportunity to review them. I think they were distributed just today.
I did. Any questions, discussion about the minutes?
Just one minor note, Jonathan's last name is misspelled twice.
Oh, no. We can.
Consistently, actually.
Yeah.
Very consistent.
O-R-E?
Yes.
No E on,
There, yeah, E at the end.
is missed.
Oh, his sign is wrong too then, isn't it?
No, we got it
What's
right.
that? Okay, I can't see it from here.
It's correct. Okay, so with the addendum of correcting Jonathan's last name, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of July 13th.
13th.
I move to approve the minutes of July 13th with the changes as approved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second that.
All right, any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Jonathan,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Corey,
Corey Beaulieu, aye.
Bill,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Marnie,
Marnie Crouch, aye.
Richard Boroff, aye.
Rick Mitchell, aye. Any additional business? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Do I have a second?
Seconded. I seconded.
Marnie Crouch seconds adjourn. Do I have a,
This is the entrance
is this unanimous?
Unanimous. Aye.
It's unanimous.
Okay, it's unanimous. We are not going to do a roll call.
He was 94
So
years
we will see you all
Skadillions of
August
children.
31st
They wanna get
at
some
1 p.m.
Somehow,
What's August 31st at 1
Our
p.m.?
sidewalk.
Our site walk. I assume,
the way it is.
I assume.